All right. An achievement committee, excellence in not equity. Equity, I got to get that right. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and it is with great honor that I am allowed, on behalf of the board, to present an award, a plaque actually, to one of our employees, actually one of our colleagues. I don't have a script, but that's okay, because on these occasions we must and should speak from the heart. Now, speaking from the heart in these situations can be very difficult, because this is a difficult job that we all have. It challenges our soul, our mind, our emotions, our spirit every day. And if you can get through those challenges and still look someone in the eye and say thank you with the most sincerest thought, that's a real blessing. And I think we all can say that about Steve Carling. Everybody probably has heard. This is Steve's last official meeting, and it won't be his last duty, but it's certainly his last meeting. And Steve, as a plaque describes, has been working in this district, or working for this district, for a number of years, going back to 2013. And I dare say there wasn't a day that Steve did not confront the most difficult challenges that this district has with a degree of optimism and forward thinking. And I, again, without a cheat sheet, I can give you just a couple of highlights. Under Steve's and Carl's leadership, and then Steve's leadership, this district has not only had the courage to confront significant challenges, some that might make another lawyer wilt in the pressure, including the death of students and having to deal with the legal consequences of that, including the ever challenges that we face trying to provide quality educational services to students with special needs, and to deal with the ever-present notion that, yes, even institutions like this sometimes fall short of the laws that require that we treat people civilly and justly. And Steve has had to deal with all those allegations and the fallout of those allegations. And notwithstanding the gravity of those charges and those challenges, Steve and his team, and I know Steve would want me to say his team, have come through as brilliant, committed public servants. Steve, and I hope my colleagues will allow me to say this, I know in a very unique way how difficult, and Adrian does too, it is to be a lawyer. To be a lawyer for the district, I would imagine, is only doubly challenging, because there is so much at stake. You know, as a lawyer, you deal with one client at a time, a lawyer like myself, but you literally are dealing with one massive client that has multiple interests at stake, including the board, the community, and the administration. And through it all, you and your team have been creative and courageous. Again, a quick list of some of your accomplishments. A lot of people think that we were drawn into court on special education. No, Steve, Carl, and their team came up with an innovative way to address the challenges that we've had in special education. And I gotta say that the appreciation for which you all thought out of the box is to the blessing of this district. Another example, when this district was challenged with a suit that suggested the board should not exist, you and your colleagues and the counsel's office came up with a creative legal argument that pushed back against that undemocratic notion. And you had to do it with a great degree of courage. Really, Steve, the list goes on and on and on, but the most important, impressive part about your work, and all of us up here know it, is that notwithstanding the constant challenges that we all face as a leadership team in the educational issues, you and your team, but you in particular, stood strong and hung in there since 2013. On behalf of the board, I want to tell you, you will be missed. and your services are much appreciated. Let's give Steve a round of applause. Come on, come on. Speech, 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 speech. It's a very beautiful plaque. I'm going to give it to Steve, but Steve, please say a few words.
It is a very beautiful plaque. Thank you. It's really been my privilege to serve the students and the families of this institution for 8 years. It was the longest legal job I've ever held, and definitely the most challenging by a lot. It is, but it's also very rewarding. The cover screen on my phone is me sitting amongst a group of kindergartners at School 29 who I just finished reading a book, and they were just mobbed onto me. That's what also makes this job so amazing, is to see the potential and the spirit of the kids when you go into those schools. And I didn't miss a single first day of school where I was there helping kids off buses and walking them to classrooms. And that's what I will truly carry with me as much as anything else. I mean, the legal things we've accomplished, and it is a tremendous team. I've been responsible for the hiring of everybody who's in that department right now. Adrian was my first hire when I was interim general counsel the first time. And I'm leaving you guys with a good legacy with that. I think you're in very good hands, and he has an open line to both me and to my predecessor, who I was lucky to learn under, Carl. So, it's been a good run, and the team we have here, it's different, as you said, and when you're in the trenches, in the middle of decisions rather than detached and watching it happen, you get emotionally involved, and but that makes it equally rewarding when things go well, and so I've certainly always appreciated the dual role that you kind of serve as both counselor and attorney, and so I've been privileged. I consider myself that, to have been able to do this for so many years, and leave behind a strong group to continue on my work. I'm a city resident. I'll still be part of all of this, in this community, and so it is definitely, as much as I'm looking forward to my next adventure, which takes me to a different part of my life, it's bittersweet leaving all this behind. So it's become something that I certainly have enjoyed doing most of the days. So and so yeah, this is my last board meeting. I hope everyone considers that tonight as we as we deliberate. But whatever we need to do, we've always been able to just get it done. And I think that I hope that we've left behind a good legacy and continue to do so. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. He won't say it, but he's probably doing cartwheels, getting out of the board meeting. But we do wish you much success, Steve, and stop by and see us sometime. All right. So the next item on the agenda is our speakers, and I'm going to turn that over to our clerk to call out the speakers.
Good evening, everyone. We are going to be having 5 speakers this evening, or 5 persons signed up to speak. There are a mix of persons joining us via Zoom as well as in person. I do want to also note that there were 41 comments submitted to the record, and those are available on the website at this time. Our first speaker is Kilolo Moyo White, a parent who is joining us to talk on the topic of school closure.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank
you have
you.
2 minutes whenever you're ready, okay?
My name is Kilolo Moyo White. Yes, and I'm a parent leader. As a parent leader, I represent not just myself, but other parents that are a part of the district and that are community members. This past weekend, we had an opportunity to participate in the Community Action Initiative. Unfortunately, many parents and family members, community members left unfulfilled and frustrated. Why haven't parents been given specific data to represent what is actually happening as it relates to violence, safety within each of the individual schools of the district. The media has a way of distorting representation of positive narratives and over-representing isolated incidences, which then characterizes the entire community of children represented within the district as violent and unteachable. That is unacceptable. Unfortunately, many people who came to learn and to think about how they could help, it was unclear for for the reasons of not having data and information about these incidences and whether they are one-off incidences or whether they are being pushed heavily in the media for unnecessary reasons that are rooted in racism. If there are higher numbers of safety issues that are at some schools versus others, more importantly, there was nothing shared about what is currently being done to address any of the types of situations that are actually happening. This kind of data is essential for parents and community members to be involved as informed citizens to understand how they should be able to be involved in the decisions around school closures. When will parents and families have a say in these decisions? If this is the conversation this evening, parents must be a part of those decisions and not left out after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moyo White. We appreciate your comments tonight. Our next speaker is Araya Camion Lin, a parent who is speaking on Resolution 2021-22-247. Araya is also joining us on Zoom, I understand?
Yeah, I am here.
Wonderful. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. President White, Vice President Elliott, Commissioners, Doctors Meyer-Small, and Dr. Nelms. My name is Aria Camioni Lind, and I am the proud parent of 3 RCSD scholars. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm asking you to vote no on Resolution 247. A few weeks ago, my children witnessed a middle school classmate attacked by adults or older children from a different school community at arrival. An RPD officer sat in his patrol car across the street and did not intervene. This, I think, is the exact incident you are trying to scare us with. A child attacked. And yet no response or support from RPD as the child rolled into a ball, trying to protect herself from the kicks and punches of her attackers. So instead, I am asking you to support resolutions that create policies and supports for evidence-based intervention and prevention. I'm asking RPD to do the job we already pay you to do. And I'm asking the Board of Ed and the superintendents to stop introducing resolutions the Board of Ed has already decided, including the question of contracts with RPD. Let's stop rehashing this conversation and let's move on to meeting the needs of our kids. Please vote no on Resolution 247. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Araya. We appreciate your comments tonight. Our next speaker is Lauren Camioni. She's also a parent speaking on Resolution 247. Is Lauren in person or on Zoom? She's on Zoom. Okay, there she is. Lauren, whenever you're ready, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So first, thank you for the opportunity to express my feelings on this topic of the resolution. I'm Lauren Camioni. I'm the proud parent of Franklin Ennis, who is a kindergartner at School 23, Emmeline, who is almost starting pre-K at St. Paul's, and Lucas, who's 6 months old and a future scholar. As always, thank you for your service to our scholars and families. I get chills about when I think about what my children will feel if the first thing they see when they arrive at school is a perimeter of squad cars surrounding them. And then when they have to walk past armed officers from a police force we have lost faith in. Will they feel scared, on guard, anxious? My children are young and impressionable, but when they grow and mature, what will the effect of these early impressions be? How can parents be comfortable with this if they cannot walk beside their children to provide guidance and support as they enter and exit a place that should be filled with hope and possibilities? I won't be there when my precious children are forced to put on a courageous face. In this vulnerable state, I, like all of the other RCSD parents, will be unable to lessen the emotional burden when the feeling of being over-policed falls on the young and tender hearts of these young people in our community. Why is this solution being considered appropriate for children who are vulnerable and in need of effective support? The RPD cannot be a part of my children's daily routine, especially as they enter and exit a place of learning every day. The association that my children will make between fear and school is unacceptable. How can we expect them to thrive in an environment which instills fear and demonstrate that those who are charged with preparing them to be successful adults have lost faith in them? I'm desperate to keep that from happening. I'm disgusted with the idea that this is being entertained. Why are people who don't live in our community or send their kids to our schools making these suggestions and demanding to be heard? I am begging you to help us put an end to institutional racism. I urge you to vote no to this resolution. I'm asking you to vote no for the ethical implications I have addressed and also for the other convincing arguments that the folks in my community will be making tonight. Thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Lauren. We appreciate your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Fleming, a parent, also speaking on Resolution 247. Is Jessica joining us in person or on Zoom? Okay, we'll give her a few minutes on Zoom.
While we're waiting for Jessica, I just wanted to recognize that Dr. Nelms is also in the meeting via Zoom. I don't know if Dr. Jallo is also.
Yes, I am.
All right. Just want to recognize that they're here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fleming, are you with us?
Hi, yeah, sorry.
Wonderful. Whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes, and welcome.
Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Jessica Fleming. I'm a parent.
1 second, Ms. Fleming. I'm going to need you to turn on your video. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Thank you.
is my video?
Okay.
Is it that? Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm a parent of 2 students in the district. One, they're both in 5th grade, one at school 45 and one at school 29. And I am also a parent on the Citizen Action Education Committee. And I am here today to ask that we vote no to paying Rochester City police officers, RPD, to sit outside of schools for 2 hours a day when that money could be used better spent on paras or social workers or someone who is trained to help and to de-escalate, which we know that police in schools leads to more criminalization of children, especially Black and brown children. We also know that the students themselves are who organize to get RPD out of their schools. And I think it sends them a really bad message to just go ahead and put RPD back in schools when the schools themselves are experiencing the same community problems that Rochester is experiencing. RPD has already paid an exorbitant amount of money to police the streets of Rochester. And our budget is very, very thin. We have like 4 times as many students in these schools per social worker than we should have. And it makes no sense for us to be paying our PD twice, first with our tax dollars as Rochester taxpayers, and then again with our school budget to patrol the city streets when the community has already said that we feel like we as a community, we spend too much on police. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fleming, we appreciate your joining us tonight. Our last speaker is Julie Rossette, a staff member who is addressing the board also on Resolution 247. Welcome, Julie. She is joining us in person.
Good evening. On Saturday, I attended the district's Community Action Initiative. I participated in a breakout group discussing social emotional needs and supports for our students. The two facilitators that led our discussion asked us, how are the children? The traditional greeting of the Maasai tribe warriors. I will attempt to answer their questions here. In September alone, 76 district-wide school counselors, myself included, completed a total of 245 mental health assessments. We responded to 81 gaggle alerts related to self-harm and completed 880 crisis interventions. These are not just numbers. These are our students. They're experiencing stress and trauma and pain due to the past year and a half, as well as many other societal and systemic factors. It's not only clear to me that our students are in crisis, it's also clear that as a district, we did little to nothing to prepare to meet their needs this school year, a year that we knew was set to unfold unlike any other. Now it's November, and the only solution that the district has proposed is to reinvest in the Rochester Police Department. As a school counselor who's experiencing firsthand the grief and trauma and needs of our students, I find the mere suggestion of the addition of police officers as support services to be insulting. The foundation of my work as a school counselor is building genuine, caring relationships with my students. The extremely high needs of our students this year have been almost impossible for myself and my colleagues to meet. Without additional social emotional supports, the current support staff are struggling to meet these demands. Up until this point, there's been little to no action in securing additional supports for our students. And at the end of last school year and throughout the summer, I participated in the forums, completed surveys, took notes at planning meetings, all of which gave me hope and were to plan for a safe and supportive return to in-person learning. We strategized ways to implement social emotional learning time in our day and assess our students' needs in the first weeks of school. We were also extremely hopeful about the CARES Act's funds that our district might finally be able to properly allocate funds to provide the additional social emotional supports that we knew our students would need. Instead, on October 1st, I received my first personnel activity report via email, informing me that my position as a full-time school counselor with 3 years in the district was now grant funded. The official announcement that CARES money was being used to fund current school counselors came from our director in our counselors meeting in late October. All of this brings me here to address you tonight. As a facilitator of restorative practices, I recognize the importance of accountability to my school community. I know that I need to be honest and admit that we are all failing our students right now. They've been historically shortchanged and underfunded education and overcrowded classes, inconsistencies, and teacher budget cuts in the middle of the school year.
Can you complete your remarks?
I can.
Because the time is up.
The action items that I came up with from Saturday for myself is to keep showing up for my students.
Can you give us your comments? Just give us your comments. The time is up.
Can I just finish my last
How much
sentence?
time, how much more time is it?
Maybe 30 seconds, just
Okay,
this.
all right.
I, along with the Rochester Organization of Rank and File Educators, will hold my union and board accountable to utilize the additional funds granted by our state for additional supports such as school counselors, social workers, and paraprofessionals, not police officers or any other outside security firms. I ask you to remember the question, how are our students and what do they truly need right now? Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, we have concluded the speakers portion, and we're going to go into executive session. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
And to discuss a personnel matter.
To discuss matters relating to the appointment and employment of particular individuals.
What Steve said. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll return probably in about 30 minutes or less. All right, thank you. In the ESA, excuse me, meeting. So the next item on the agenda is, excuse me, is consideration, thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Powell reminded me, excuse me, to acknowledge that Commissioner LeBron and Commissioner Adams are out on excused absence, so they are not here with us this evening.
I believe Commissioner LeBron joined the Zoom. Can we confirm if Commissioner LeBron is in the Zoom room? She was for executive session, but is not there. Okay, so she may join again, just letting you know, but Commissioner Adams is out for sure.
All right, thank you. So consideration for the consent agenda items, can I get a motion to discuss resolutions 254 through 261?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Well, and then are any questions about resolutions 254 through 261? I think I had a question on 261. When I looked at the attachment, excuse me, I wasn't clear about, just get to it, the exception form. And so can someone explain, because I see this is the first time I've seen this kind of resolution deadline exception form. Can someone explain what we're doing here and who is do we have information on who the new associate director is? That's what I was unclear about.
Good evening, commissioners. I can speak about the deadline exception form. We have a timeline associated with the development and submission of resolutions. We actually have a resolutions calendar that we have to follow. If there is a resolution that is submitted after that timeline, there is a resolution deadline exception form that must be submitted to provide the rationale for why the timeline wasn't adhered to. And so that is the explanation. So with board docs, we are adding that documentation for your review as well.
So do we know who this person is? Or do we need to, does that need to be in the resolution of who the person is?
I do believe that is another resolution that is included.
Looks like it's resolution 261 that the deadline's for, and the resolution itself is down there. It's H in the packet. It's to appoint, it looks like Stephanie Thomas as one of the CSE chairs.
So resolution 261 was for the exception.
I think the exception was to allow resolution 261 to come in since it was late. That's how I'm reading it.
That is correct.
Okay, so we didn't need to have in this particular, in the resolution, the name of the person who's the new director? That didn't need to be in this resolution?
Her name is in the resolution itself, Commissioner, just not in the deadline exception because it's noted.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on these resolutions? All right, hearing no other questions, can, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
The voting is live on board docs. I'm still waiting for one more.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't logged in, sorry.
If you want to verbally, until you log in, I can take your vote.
It'll only take a second.
Oh, no problem.
There it is, okay, sorry.
There we go. Voting closed.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion for resolution 260?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions on resolution 260? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Are we going
Okay,
to,
the
waiting for
motion
the,
is, yep,
there we
motion
go.
is open. Okay, that passed unanimously.
Okay. So can I get a motion to lift from the table the resolution to authorize agreement with the City of Rochester Police Department for police services at arrival and dismissal, Resolution 247, from the October 28th, 2021 business meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comment on Resolution 247?
But this is just to lift from the table, so.
Say that again?
This is just to lift that resolution from the
Excuse me.
table.
Okay.
At this time. We'll do the vote after.
All right. So can I get a motion?
Wait, you just need to vote.
Sorry, moving too quick.
Okay, that close, so no, the resolution is now back on the table.
Okay, so do we need a motion for this? So can I get a?
Seconded.
Any questions on Resolution 247?
I had one. I know the survey was done. Are we going to get the results? The public going to get the results of the survey before or after we vote?
The results of the survey are now public.
They are? Okay.
Yes, on board docs.
Thanks.
Commissioner Malloy?
Is there any way, Dr. Myers-Small, that you could discuss some of the results with us prior to our vote?
I would respectfully defer to Chief Marisol Lopez as she
Continue to provide support outside of our 11 secondary schools during arrival and dismissal times. If you are in favor of continued RPD support outside of our school buildings, please press 1 now. If no, please press 2. Thank you for your feedback. We also sent out the survey in an email format to the families who we have registered emails for. And families were allowed to vote once, so they either voted by phone or they voted via email. We received a total of, excuse me, let me tell you the totals first. We also administered the survey in Spanish. And again, this is new technology that we are utilizing. So we are working on additional languages as we proceed with this tool. We had a total of 4,125 respondents. 1,900, excuse me, 2,000, oh, now I'm going to have to do math. I'm sorry, Commissioner Malloy. I want to be exact with these numbers. We had a total of 2,136 families respond. Of that number, 1906 said yes, and 230 said no. In addition, we had 2,410 staff respond. 2,219 said yes, and 191 said no.
So what percentage of our families engaged in this survey?
So the English language survey, we had 8.71 of our families participate. And our Spanish-speaking survey, we have a total of 4,137 families registered as Spanish-speaking as the primary language, 435 total respondents, and that's 10.5% of the total Spanish-speaking population.
And although I responded to the survey just as a parent in the district, what was the time frame that parents had to respond to this survey?
We left the survey open for 2 days.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a comment.
President White?
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. I just want to make clear, some in the community have described this as a Hobson choice. We either have police officers stationed outside our schools and no social workers inside our schools. And additionally, people have said we should not have police officers in our schools because we need social workers in our schools. Let me repeat, this is not a Hobson's choice. These are not mutually exclusive choices. We need counselors and social workers and psychiatrists providing important behavioral and mental health supports for our children in our schools. But we also need our children protected from those that do not respect human life in our community. And sadly, they are out there. My colleagues and I have seen, and perhaps some of you have seen through personal cell phone footage, the kind of shooting that has taken place right outside our schools. Sometimes it has looked like scenes from movies like New Jack City, but it's real. And anybody who knows anything about weapons, the movie industry would make you think that you can point and shoot and kill a particular person. But what is most likely to happen is that one of those bullets that we witnessed being shot from a gun as a person ran in the opposite direction, it's likely to hit an innocent person. And sadly, because this stuff is taking place on school grounds, it might be one of our children. So we should, and we can do both. That is, provide protection and safety for our children outside of schools, and also provide for their mental health and support inside our schools. We do not have to choose. We can have police officers outside of schools and social workers inside our schools. Additionally, it has been said that the money being spent is allowing the police department to be paid twice. Also in the police department. So what we have been told by the Rochester Police Department and the mayor of our city is that the police officers that are stationed outside of our schools are there because they're there on overtime. The balance of the police officers that we need to protect us and want them to protect us are deployed in their regular assignments. The police officers that would be surrounding our schools and not surrounding them like a moat. I think somebody suggested as if our children were somehow surrounded by the police. We're talking about one or two police cars outside of our schools. Those officers are there on overtime while their colleagues are working their regular shifts. There just aren't enough police officers on duty. And in fact, I have been told by a number of people, not only the mayor, but the mayor-elect, that they don't even have a sufficient recruitment class to fully employ our police department. So we're paying them because they are there on overtime, which is their contractual right. You also heard the results of the poll. Now, nobody up here is going to make a decision just because some citizens have said they want police outside of schools. But we're all elected officials, and we're charged with the responsibility of at least listening to those that we represent. These voices, let's be clear, are very loud. The results of the poll are overwhelming. 4,000 people who we are charged with providing protection and service have said to us unequivocally in a poll, at least 80% of our parents and caregivers and 90+% of our staff people, which we are responsible for, have said to us in no uncertain terms, they believe having police outside of schools is part, the operative phrase here, is part of the answer by which we provide for our children and our staff people in our schools. Let me conclude, Madam Vice President, by saying I have seen, as a civil rights attorney, the suffering that comes as a result of police abusing our citizens. I dare say I have seen it in a way that it has become a part of my personal and professional psyche. People who have actually lost their lives to police officers. I am also, regrettably, in the position of saying, I have also seen what happens when students die or are injured on school grounds. That is also the result of my role as an attorney in this community. We do not have to accept either one. We do not have to have lawyers that sue police officers. We do not have to have lawyers who sue school districts because people die. We don't need that if we have a district that understands this isn't a Hobson's choice. These aren't mutually exclusive approaches. We can protect our children outside of schools by collaborating with the police department, and we can protect and enhance the lives of our children by having social workers, counselors, caseworkers, teachers who love and embrace our children and provide them the behavioral and mental health support services that they need. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to see if Commissioner LeBron is interested in sharing her thoughts around this issue.
I am, thank you. So a couple of things. I just want to note, based on that survey, that we actually don't have all of the emails and correct phone numbers for our 23,000+ parents. It was a moot point to actually survey staff because their collective bargaining voices were very clear in their letter that they supported SRO. So I don't know why we went and did that unless you all are looking for an out to use and fluff up the numbers. But I do want to uplift the fact that all of our parent organizations, both in the district, in the city of Rochester, and those in Monroe County that support our city of Rochester parent organizations, submitted a letter to this board adamantly against it. And so some of those parents they didn't even receive a robocall or an email. And someone like myself, I received it twice. So I would not jump to conclusions that this is the best data and the best survey possible out there. Furthermore, when we talk about harming children and we're talking about Black and brown children, I know for a fact, certainly we're not talking about the police are not going to harm Black and brown children. We know that they harm Black and brown children. And if the police were a preventive measure, both in the city to both prevent violence or stop violence, we would not see the violence influx that we've seen in the city of Rochester, especially over this pandemic year. In addition to that, I do want to add to this notion that, no, these are not mutually exclusive. I'm always going to never support police officers in schools. I've quoted and cited multiple data points. People can do the research for themselves. You don't have to take my own ability to go and do research to understand that police officers in schools, in contact with students, does not lead to positive, better outcomes for Black and brown students. And I just want to uplift a couple of things that City Council said last week on record. It's particularly Willie Lightfoot said, why should they, City Council, vote on allowing overtime for police officers in our schools if the school board couldn't muster up the leadership to make the right decision and have cops and want the police there because they couldn't get to 4 votes and this had to be tabled. And so to Patterson, I would echo back that we as school board members can only do so much to keep our school environment safe. But if there is an uptick in violence, which there is, and an uptick in gangs in the community, in the city of Rochester, that they are the elected body that need to address those things. Not the Rochester City School Board, but the Rochester City Council. They were kicking the can back to Bello. Kick the can however y'all want to kick the can, but it falls on your shoulders. You are the elected body for the city of Rochester, and the community deserves answers on what you are all prepared to do to address the needs in this community around violence. And obviously it's not the police, because again, if it was the police, we would not have violence. We would have less, they would prevent it. We wouldn't see it. It wouldn't be happening, but we continuously see it, and it's been increasing. So to my colleagues voting tonight, to those who said they want the true, authentic parent voice, please listen to the parents who have come out of their way to come speak to this board, who have put it in writing, who have sent messages, who have, as a unit and a collective, sent us letters asking us not to support police officers outside of schools. And because it's not mutually exclusive, one or the other, all we are sending is that we can quickly get overtime money for police officers, but we can't quickly provide mental health services for our students. That's the message that we're sending. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Let me just see if Dr. Jallo would like to offer any comments.
No, thank you, not at this time. No.
All right, thank you. Dr. Nelms, what about you?
Good evening, board. I wasn't expecting to make a comment, but I will. I have been pretty open and honest about the need for support outside of schools before the start of school, at the end of school. I think that having officers outside of the school before and after, it shouldn't be as polarizing as it is. But I also understand some of the community concerns. It's also encouraging to know that the data suggests that there are a large number of parents who don't see that as being problematic. So it's a difficult decision for the board to make. This is, again, it's a polarizing issue within the community, but as someone who does bus duty morning and evening and stand, with parents outside and staff outside, it has been a resource for the school. It has not been combative. Students have not appeared. Again, I haven't surveyed all the kids, but they're so, I said earlier at a different board meeting, they're across the street in a parking lot, not even on campus. And when they do get out, it's only been once or twice they've engaged, productively with helping stop traffic and making sure that kids who are coming through neighborhoods and going across the street are crossing safely. So again, I just think that we heard from people tonight in public session. We've heard from parents at East saying that it's a good idea to have officers before and after. We've also heard from parents saying that they don't want that. So I don't think any decision the board is going to make tonight is going to satisfy everyone. But my major concern right now is making sure that we can provide a sense of support for our students and staff before and after school. And I also want to say long-term, as a community, we can't have a situation where we never trust the police. At some point, we have to work towards having better relationships with them in the community and them with the community. That's critically important. I think I've said to folks in the past, I have a number of law enforcement relatives and friends. And so I've seen really good officers with good intentions. And I've also been fully aware of officers that do not have the best intentions. But I think in any industry, you can make that statement about people who say they're here to protect and serve this community. So again, I don't envy the choice that has to be made tonight by the board, if the vote's going to be taken. But I do want to reiterate that I think having officers outside the school allows us to focus on the healing and caring that's going to occur inside the school with our incredible social workers, counselors, and staff, and other individuals who are here to support our youth.
Thank you, Dr. Nelms. Anybody else? Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, let me start by saying that there's nothing that President White has said that I could argue against. I'd love to have a Lincoln Douglas debate with you, but I would have to choose, I would have to cover areas that you didn't even cover in your remarks because I can't argue against the topics you did cover. I also want to say, not to be argumentative with another board member, but from a statistical standpoint, the return on this survey is really quite remarkable. Most surveyors do not hope to achieve as high a percentage of responses as what is here from the families category, and to have as high a response from the Spanish-speaking families is also really quite remarkable. So I commend the communications department for their work, and Marisol in particular for presenting that information to us. As I said, I can argue against it if folks wanted to sit through a debate. In particular, I was concerned hearing from parents who let me say it differently. In particular, I was concerned of hearing from white parents about concerns that their children would feel that they were walking into hostile environment by walking past police officers. Culturally, that doesn't happen. Culturally, our white kids see right past police officers. It's like they're not even there. And because they've never had a bad dealing with the police officers. What worries me is that we're not hearing anything from families of color that would convey one way or the other whether they perceive that experience to be detrimental to them and their children. That silence to me is deafening, and it hurts. The story that President White told of seeing on video, you know, shootings on the run, like some Wild West scene or something, is very, very compelling towards changing my initial position. One student dying on RCSD property or adjacent to it is one child too many, and the idea of not doing everything we can to prevent that scares me. So I would ask, in the instance of the Wild West video that I saw, they don't have standard arrival dismissal times. So my question is, for the North Star location, is there an adaptation of this to make sure that we have police officers on a broader timetable than just an hour, you know, an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening? And because there is no like one single arrival time and one single dismissal time. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, I think you're referring to All City High School, Commissioner Powell, not, North Star has a pretty consistent.
Yeah, the one next to the church that we saw the video of.
Right, no, so all that.
Yeah, I beg your pardon, yeah.
So your question is there flexibility with that particular school? I don't think there is. I think it's, you know, around where when most of the students would be coming in. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Well, that's going to remain an ongoing concern because I believe the video that we saw was of the middle of the day, like 11 o'clock in the afternoon. And so when I think, okay, well, we need to do everything we can, everything in our power to prevent that, we conceivably would have spent, you know, approximately $78,000 and still not gotten the coverage where the likelihood is highest of, based on what we saw with our own eyes, of it happening again. So perhaps you can give that some more consideration. But the obstacle I have is that, you know, the city of Rochester got CARES money, same as we did. And to the extent that the violence in our streets is a product of the COVID and lockdowns and remote learning, I feel that the city should be stepping up and using their CARES Act dollars to pay for police. Of course it's not free. Of course we have to pay overtime to police to do this. But unlike a sporting event, the arrival of our students at schools and the departure from schools at dismissal time is not a special event. It's integral to the fabric of our community. And it seems to me that our police, generally speaking, should be attuned to that and should be you know, doing everything in their power to protect our students as they come and go. Because they spend a lot more time on the city streets, not on our property, than they do on our property. If they're walking to school, they're walking for blocks without the benefit of a police officer parked across the street or whatever. So the only mitigating factor that I can find to say yes to this is that it's a contract for a 1 month in duration, right? This is just a 30-day contract?
30 days, yes.
I guess from the standpoint of it being an experiment of sorts or a stopgap measure, I can abide it, but I'm really not happy with the choices that I have presented to me. So that's all
All right, thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Clark?
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. I just want to indicate that this has really been an agonizing decision for me over the last week. And this is one of the reasons I asked that it be tabled last week, was so that we could get parent input. And I think the administration has done an outstanding job in soliciting that parent input. But I do understand both sides of the equation. But I also want to acknowledge the close to 100 emails that I personally received regarding this issue, all in favor of not having the police in the vicinity of the schools. But it is, I mean, but it is a complex issue, and we've all seen the videos. We know that there's actually been gunfire, and we need to do everything that we can to protect our students. But one of the things that I feel conflicted about, this is a problem that was created by an image problem created by the Rochester Police Department. And it was created by them because of the way some of them have traditionally treated black and brown individuals. I know personally that basically they really don't, I mean, I really don't see the de-escalation when it comes to our population. And I think the police department needs to get more involved in restorative practices, conflict resolution, and de-escalation for the entire community. And hopefully there's some kind of component that could be added on to this so that the entire community feel that when we see protect and serve, we believe it means protect and serve everyone. And so, but at the same point in time, you know, at the level of violence we've seen at some of our high schools, and that's another question I would have, can we target it more to certain high schools where we know these incidences are happening? But at the end of the day, you know, I would not feel comfortable not voting in support of this, knowing that innocent lives may be endangered, basically given the video and the instances that I've seen and heard about.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Before you, Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. Just to make a brief statement, first of all, this resolution is not putting SROs back in our schools. And although my children have a very different cultural experience, and you know, my son got along with his school's SRO just fine. In fact, he wanted to become a cop when he was in kindergarten based on his positive interactions with SROs. But we removed them from our schools, and I voted for that. So as a mom and teacher, I absolutely agree that kids need social, emotional supports in their schools, not cops. And I've never argued for putting cops into schools, and I actually voted to remove the SROs from our schools last year. But there are two separate issues at play here: the violence in our surrounding school neighborhoods and the needs of our students inside of schools. And although I do support the superintendent's proposal to allow temporary RPD presence across the street from schools to address the need for a quick response from RPD, and they're not on school property, and this is as a preventive measure for some of the recent gang-related shootings and weapons incidents at arrival and dismissal times, I believe that cops do not belong on our campuses. The city and RCSD work together to ensure faster responses in light of RPD's own shortage of officers by having close proximity to campuses if immediately needed. And this is an entirely separate issue, though, than what we need inside of our school buildings. Our students' well-being inside of our schools is critical. Adequately staffing our buildings and providing essential social emotional supports must be our top priorities as students return to school after almost 2 years of interrupted learning. Restorative practice and in-person instruction is critical for our students and staff members who are deeply hurting. And we must begin targeted investment in same building alternative programming that provides for the unique needs of our struggling scholars. Together, we can advocate for this and see it to fruition. So I want to thank all of our community members for their commitment to restorative practice and the needs of our kids. We really are all in this together, and we have to unify to effect change. And I believe that RPD outside of our schools at this time is part of that collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. I have a couple of questions. The resolution indicates 1 hour at one school, and I'm wondering if, in fact, that we are utilizing these resources as effectively as we can. I'm not sure of what 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon, the impact that that would have for 11 schools. And I think Commissioner Clark mentioned a little bit about that. And so, and then this is only for 1 month. So I'm concerned that where would we go? What's the next step? That if we're only talking about 1 month, what is that going to deter? So, Commissioner, okay.
Good evening. President White, Vice President Elliott, good evening, Superintendent. The thought around the 1 hour is to be there a little before dismissal, when students start arriving, either they're walking to school or getting dropped off, and then by 30 minutes after, we basically have all of our students off campus at that point. So that's the theory of action, so to speak, around that 1 hour, to be there a little before dismissal, and then certainly be there until all the students have more or less left campus.
And they're going to remain in their cars, though, correct?
Absolutely. Unless there's some sort of an action of a criminal nature, then that's the sole intent.
So do we need 11? Do we need to have police presence at all 11 high schools?
We have had incidences at all of the schools to date, so that's why we selected the secondary buildings, the high schools, as well as number 3 school, our middle school, our current only middle school. That's why they were selected. I think after a window of time, we should be able to reevaluate kind of where that is. But based upon the data that we have, or based upon the information that we have, we've had specific instances at all. From my vantage point, is much like the contract with Blackhawk, the 30-day window was to allow us to evaluate whether or not this is a process or a program we want to continue with. So we don't sign on for a long-term commitment. We really just, it allows us time to kind of really evaluate its effectiveness. And then we come back to the Board of Education if we choose to continue this relationship, for you to deliberate again and make a decision with a recommendation. And the same would be true for our outside security. Those two they're aligned purposely with this own window, this own time window.
All right, thank you. I'm just, I'm concerned about the efficacy of this. What is going to be the outcome of this? And I guess I don't want us to spend resources when, you know, it may not have the kind of impact. And then what does that mean for succeeding months? You know, are we going to be spending this amount of money in succeeding months if we do this? I guess I just still have these questions, particularly with this particular resolution, if it's going to have the kind of impact that we want it to have. So I guess I'll just ask you to respond, Madam Superintendent, with that as well. I heard from Mike, but what's your thoughts around? I just don't. I don't see it having the kind of impact that we may want it to have, and if it's just a police presence and police can't get out of the cars. And while I do believe there is some value in having police presence to deter some activity, I guess my concern is that this is only going to be for 30 days. But Mike was saying that we may reevaluate this, and the question becomes if the city is willing to continue this as well, because they're short staff. Is this something that they will continue? So, I have these questions about this, particularly about it for this short amount of time, the 1 month, and that is 1 month in the morning and 1 month in the afternoon. So, for me, I'm not sure about it, the way in which the resolution is crafted. So it's difficult.
So a few things, Vice President Elliott. I certainly echo Dr. Nelm's sentiments around this is a difficult decision because we know that law enforcement is polarizing in urban communities and particularly polarizing in our Rochester community. We did follow up as it was asked of us to administer the survey, and you can see what the results are. It did not cover all of our families, so I just want to insert certainly here that that I would just ask our families, please make sure that your information is updated and that we have accurate emails and accurate cell phones so we can reach out to you for a variety of things. As far as the 30-day nature, we had so many things that were happening at the start of the school year, and we know that we've had some incidents that were very troubling, that involved weapons and that were frankly scary for us to see. This was just an opportunity to try and I'll reiterate what Commissioner Malloy said, this was not about SROs. And I just want to make sure it's very clear to our community. This was not the path, and this is not a precursor for me to go down the path as far as having SROs. This was just to have a police presence near our schools to respond because we were seeing things that were coming from our neighborhoods and coming onto our school campuses. I do also agree with what Commissioner Powell said around can we continue to have conversations with the Rochester Police Department about how they can work their schedules around being in the vicinity of our schools and things of that nature as we move forward. But I think this is a good measure for us to take a look at. We will make sure that we're evaluating. We'll take a look at the incidents that are happening on our campuses and what's going on, and then we will absolutely circle back. But this was just a short-term measure to have presence near schools, not as SROs, not on the campuses, but to just have that presence to try and potentially thwart some trouble that could be coming on campuses. But I understand where you're coming from as far as your concerns, as well as Commissioner Clark's concerns. But we will evaluate, we'll take a look at this, but this really was just intended to be a short-term measure because we were just seeing such an uptick of violence, and it was very concerning to myself and the team.
So what outcomes are you, what measures are you going to be using to judge whether or not the use of this funding has had impact and the amount of time that has impact? What measures are you using? What indicators to determine if this is effective or not?
Great question, Vice President Elliott. We need to look at the time frame when the when RPD is at arrival and dismissal, and all we can really do most simplistically is to take a look at just activities that are happening at each one of those 11 locations and to see what's happening. Are we still having the same amount of fights or disruptions or individuals from the neighborhoods of the community coming up on our campuses? And we'll just have to measure that very carefully. I think that's really the only and really the most direct way that we can take a look at this and as far as measurement.
So I'll just end by saying this one thing. I think that as opposed to us having police officers in all 11 high schools, that, because I don't think, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if there is the level of gravity in all 11 high schools. You know, there may be a fight here or there, but that may be something that the counselors or the school can address. But are there schools, for example, like Franklin, and what we saw, you know, what we know about All City, you know, those are two that we may need to ensure that we have, or East, for example, where we may want to ensure that we have the police presence. But is it necessary actually to have the police presence at, you know, all the 11 high schools? Is that something that we need to evaluate? And I'm not sure which schools, for example, School Without Walls, or SODA, you know, some of these schools, you know, I don't know if there's been an uptick in those programs or not, but for example, School Without Walls, you know, if they've had no incidents per se, do we need to have a police presence at School Without Walls, for example?
So School Without Walls is not one of the buildings that we'll have a police presence at. The other buildings that you mentioned, we certainly have had incidences, including School of the Arts. So no building has really been immune from some sort of an incident during the first 2 months of school. And that was the basis for why we had selected those particular schools.
All right, thank you. Well, if no other questions, we will, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of resolutions 247?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, and I'll go with yes. So, Madam Superintendent, you know, I'm asking that, you know, we come back after a month and, you know, give us the evaluation of this. Also, you know, provide this information to the community, because this is a difficult situation. But of course, you know, we've got parents who've said yes, but we've got other parents who've said no with this. But they're not inside the school, they're on the outside, and I do think that there needs to be a visible presence to try to deter some behavior that may happen if there were not any police. So, President White?
Yeah, Madam Vice President, as you know, this decision today, which I am extremely pleased that the board has moved in this very cautious direction. But it didn't just happen, as you know. We've had a number of meetings with the mayor and the chief of police, the superintendent, yourself, and other staff members. And that the audience in that group, the participants in that group, have grown to include mental health and behavioral support officials from the superintendent's cabinet, as well as from the mayor's cabinet. So I think the decision that the board made today to authorize for a period of 1 month,
30 days.
30 days, 30 days, the engagement of the police for this purpose can and will lead to an evaluation of those services. I also believe, given how we got here today, it will lead to a broader discussion about how we provide for the protection of students in and outside schools. And I want to specifically tell people, not only will we be monitoring and managing what happens as a result of these interactions over the next 30 days, but we will continue to broaden our discussion about what the city and the school district, and most recently, as I mentioned today in an officers meeting, what the county can do to provide critical behavioral and mental health services for our children inside schools. Let me repeat, this has never been a Hobson's choice. These are efforts and initiatives that we can, as a community, pursue together. Some people have said that police cannot prevent crime. You all may recall, I know I do, about 20-something years ago, this community, including those at City Hall, engaged in an extensive, aggressive effort at community policing. Back in the 90s, The homicide rate was just one short of where we're at right now. And the former mayor of the city of Rochester, Bill Johnson, determined to engage the police, the schools, and social service providers in addressing crime and violence. So I am not one to believe that this community can't return to the days where police, social service providers, and school districts work together to make this community safe. It has happened before. It can happen again.
And I'll just end by saying this one thing that, you know, in the media, you know, we've got some people who are calling our students criminals. And I remember when I just used the term about our kids who were going through things, knuckleheads, and one of the, one person, you know, challenged me about using the term knuckleheads, that we don't call our kids knuckleheads. But we've got people who are calling our students criminals. And so I do take exception to that, and I want to put on the record that our children are not criminals. They have some issues that they're dealing with. There are a lot of people who are going through issues, but with our students who are the most vulnerable, the term that is used to label our kids as criminals, I really take exception to that, and really would like the person who said that about our children to apologize about it. Thank you.
Madam Vice President, can I also add, because I think this is important, and you all know, I never miss an opportunity to say thank you. The mayor of the city of Rochester has excellent leadership in having this conversation, along with the superintendent, as an ongoing part of how to address the problem. I also might add, Vice President Elliott, that we have an incoming mayor who I believe was brought up politically in an environment where we believed in community policing and we believed in collaborating. Of course, I'm speaking to our former president of the school board, Malik Evans. So I think we are coming into an era with the current administration and with the administration that is coming forward that understands that it's important that police and the school district and the city hall and county work together collaboratively to address this issue of violence.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolution 248. Can I get a motion for Resolution 248?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions about Resolution 248? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have to wait for the, okay. Okay.
Okay, I believe Commissioner LeBron is now out of the Zoom room, correct? I'll have to mark her absent. Can you let me know if Commissioner LeBron is still in the Zoom room?
He is not.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, passes.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to go to the review and acceptance of the ESA minutes from October 12th of the ESA Committee of the Whole. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? Okay, thank you. Do we need to have the, okay. Okay.
Okay, passes.
All right, thank you. So I believe that concludes the voting on resolutions, and we'll go to an academic update by Dr. Kathy Black, Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Just want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. Yay.
Sorry. Little celebration.
We heard that. Yay.
Good evening, Commissioners. I come to you bringing November academic updates. We will begin, as we always do, grounding our work in our guiding principles. You'll see the update that we made to highlight the key language that you need to be using as we venture into our schools and classrooms and we prioritize academics as we respond to our social emotional needs. So As we begin, we know that every child deserves to engage with grade level content every day. We know that our students must engage in high quality, culturally responsive experiences where they are affirmed, seen, and valued, and that we have an obligation to provide an equitable experiences to every student across the district that is not dependent on where they live and where they go to school. I'm grounding here because as we add additional information about our academic progress, these ideas and principles will become more clear as we move through the presentation and through the remainder of our school year. As we know in the academic overview, our world lives in the intersection of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and you probably can finish where professional development sits. So our overview and highlights are grounded in those things. Our instructional highlights, and forgive me to be using notes as my eyes are giving me a little bit of a moment. So we hosted a number of our school visits this year, our first round of school visits for our receivership schools. School leaders were able to present in highlights of progress around the demonstrable indicators, school-wide initiatives, and conducted classroom visits, which means that our school state teams that visited us were able to go into classrooms and see instruction happening. This connects directly to a question that Commissioner Elliott raised in our previous session around the robust instruction that's happening. And so I wanted to just share around some instructional highlights. So we're in classrooms. We're visiting, my team is visiting, the CAO team is visiting, school chiefs and principals are visiting and providing feedback. Evidence that's being collected is around two key areas. And so as we baseline instruction around how we talk about classrooms across the district, right now we're looking at the culture of learning. So our students working on the related work from bell to bell. The culture of learning is actually about the environment that is happening in classrooms, and we're collecting evidence and looking at things like, are students working from bell to bell? Are there clear transitions? Are there clear routines? Are students attending to those things? Someone said this around classroom management, but lifting up the language is around, are the conditions right for kids to be working on the right stuff at the right time in the right way? The other thing we're collecting a lot of evidence on is essential content, which is that notion around grade level content. Are students working on grade level content in the right way at the right time of the year with the right level of materials? And so principals, chiefs, the CAO team, the content directors are going in and collecting evidence in those ways. How it's showing up is learning targets. So when you walk into a classroom, on a board, do you see a clear statement about what's happening? What are students expected to know and be able to do? I'm happy to report that while the quality of our learning targets is a wide range, and we're working on that, in all the classrooms that were visited by the state, learning targets were posted. In the 5 classrooms I visited at Franklin Lower, learning targets were posted. In the 3 classrooms I visited at Franklin Upper, learning targets were posted. And so that language around our teachers clearly identifying what students should know and be able to do is taking hold in the district, and that's really exciting. Classroom environments. Again, a wide range, but places where there are good anchor charts. An anchor chart is a way for a student to refer to some key information that helps learning. So those are in classrooms, but I will name that the classroom environments and the resources that are around in classrooms needs to be updated so that we have our students in places where when they look around the room, they can see evidence of learning and the tools for success. And then grade level instruction. And this is where I'm really excited because in the classrooms that I visited, and I'm gonna call some of them out, an English 3 classroom where the teacher was working on citing textual evidence using an Edgar Allan Poe short story, grade level. The math middle school teacher who was teaching logic functions and equations at grade level to a group of boys. My living environments teacher who had young men at leadership with 2 cups of plants that they had grown, getting observations and debating around what things they added to their plants made them grow more, and capturing notes. And so while there's this narrative about what our babies are doing in other environments, there's a counter narrative that I want to put in that instruction is happening in classrooms and kids are attending to. And I'll name that my Edgar Allan Poe teacher and my living environment teacher and my middle school math teacher were at Franklin in leadership, secondary schools. And then I'm gonna shout out a second grade teacher, and I don't have it, but, oh, I do have it. I'm gonna just read the quote from professional development from a second grade teacher around grade level instruction that I think is a really powerful message about the idea that we've been lifting around acceleration, which it says, teacher said that we have completely changed her mind this year with grade level material, even gave examples. She said she would never have been on board with it until we spoke about it and she tried it, and now she's seeing for herself the results of providing access to grade level material to kids who are not at grade level yet. And so I'm lifting up the instructional highlights, and there are lots of stories where instruction is happening. Equally, there are lots of places where we have a lot of opportunities to grow, but prioritizing grade level instruction in every classroom for every kid is gonna pay the dividends that we need to deposit in as we look at some of our other data that we have to respond to. Assessment. So last month I named that we have a whole bunch of assessment windows open. Feedback around the amount of assessments that we're offering and requiring teachers and students to attend to. We know that it is a lot. However, we have to get information on what our kids know and are able to do, and the only way we can get it is by getting it from assessments. And so our NWEA window opened up on September 20th and closed on October 15th. Our CFA window opened on October 18th and closed on November 12th, which is also the last day of our first quarter. And then our iReady window, which is our district-wide tool that we're rolling out, the window opens on November 15th and closes on December 10th. As a name of terms of NWEA, because that window has opened and closed, I want to share with you some data that we got from that tool. Please be mindful that I'm going to go very slow for my own edification so that I make sure I communicate the correct information in response to the data. So, NWEA completion. This is simply a measure of how many or the percentage of the eligible students for the assessment took it. And so we see that for ELA, the eligible students, or the percentage of eligible students that took the assessment at BOY or beginning of the year was 87%. The amount of eligible students who took the assessment at BOY in math was 86%, which is an overwhelming increase from the amount of students that took the assessment last year. So we're excited about that. And we had a couple of schools that were very close to 100%. And so I want to acknowledge that as well, that this was a place last year we were in a very different attending to the NWEA assessment. Just for informational purposes, NWEA is offered in ELA, so reading, English language arts, mathematics, and in a very few amount of schools we offer it in science, which is tied to demonstrable indicators. We typically administer the NWEA assessment 2 to 3 times a year. You may say, why is it variable? Our kindergarten students in some environments don't take it at BOY, some do. And so the ones who are in kindergarten who don't take it at BOY, that's my 2 times administration, or in other grade levels, K-8, that's my 3-time administration. Administration typically takes place BOY, beginning of the year, MOY, middle of the year, somewhere winter around January, and then EOY, end of the year, to then get a measure of how students have grown across the continuum. And then just for a note, that this may be the time this year in 21-22 where you will see NWEA being presented or shared, as we are in talks to phase it out for this year in service of lifting up iReady, which is our district-wide tool that we're rolling out this year. So some achievement data. And so I'd encourage you to actually look at your screen as opposed to try to squint here. So there are 3 color blues I want to orientate you to. The first one on the left represents the New York State 2019 proficiency data. So that is the information that was gathered when students took the New York State assessment. The middle bar, which is the kind of blue, represents the 2020 NWEA projection, which means that after the students took the 2020 beginning of the year, NWEA, this was the amount of students that were projected to be at proficiency at the end of the year. So there's a projection measure here that says when you take it at the beginning of the year, based on your performance, we think that you're going to do this at the end of the year. And then that darker blue is that same thing for this year's administration. I'm going to take a pause and let you have a moment to look at what you notice. And in most grades, you notice that our projection for 2021 is lower than our performance at the end of the year in 2019, with the exception of 6th grade and 8th grade. This information tells us or verifies that we have a lot of unfinished learning to attend to, which is why that idea of grade level instruction is really, really important to provide to our students, which is why you lift up the access to short stories around Edgar Allan Poe and that canon, and the idea that kids are reading at level with support and scaffolds for teachers, because we have a lot of unfinished learning to attend to in this area. Similar thing for math. And as our math data that we reported from New York State Assessment this year or last year passed, we know that math is an area of great concern for us. And so same thing, the first bar on the left represents the performance of our students on the 2019, so that school year where students were last in school full-time, New York State Assessment in grades 3 through 8. That middle bar, last year's NWEA projection. That dark bar, this year's NWEA projection. So similar to ELA, we have a lot of unfinished learning to attend to. And again, grade level instruction becomes ever so important. That's NWEA data. There's lots more that we can share. We will attach additional data sets around NWEA to the Friday letter. But I wanted to put in front of us, building our proficiency as a collection, as an organization, to engage with our achievement data, and then seeing where we are so that when we lift up instructional quality and assessment information and grade level access, we know what we're attending to in terms of what our students need to know and be able to do. So I'm going to make a hard pivot. So that was our instruction, our assessment. This is around professional development. You will hear me say this all the time: curriculum, instruction, assessment, and then PD. What's important to note in this past month are two things. We are feverishly working to update our 3-year professional development plan so that we can get feedback from stakeholders, groups across the organization around our plans and any updates or insights that they want to offer us about what they need to know and be able to do in order to deliver on our promise of high quality instruction for students. So that is in the works, and when ready for prime time, we will share with the board for their feedback and other stakeholder groups. Additionally, RCSD as an entity was invited by New York State Education Department to pilot a new survey tool to talk about our professional development offerings in concert with our 3-year plan. We did submit, or are intending to submit very soon, high-level details about our plans for new teachers, returning teachers, diverse learners, so your students who are identified with special education needs, or your language learners, support staff, SSOs, a robust offering from IM&T around all the technology supports and softwares that we use. So we are submitting and partnering in a pilot to share our PD plans with the state. Hopefully we'll get some feedback. And so that is professional development. The other things that I want to share, and it's going to be 2 hard pivots coming up. So I'm going to go into student voice, and then behind student voice, new course selection, and then we'll wrap. But I want to just name the hard pivots we're going to make. So student voice initiative. Really excited about this. We shared this with you all in August and September, and I believe there was a charge from the board that said, okay, Dr. Black and company, we're going to hold you to this around doing this work. And I am happy to acknowledge that we have launched into the Student Voice Initiative experience, really digging into how to collect and respond to what our students are saying to us. I want to publicly thank our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Curriculum Audit, our Social Studies Department, and our school principals who engaged in this effort. That is also informed by our board policy 0201, which asks us to develop and implement equitable practices for and with our students. So why are we gathering information? Well, policy says we do it for them and we do it with them. And intentionally seeking and including students' multiple perspectives in everything that we do. And so we are in a small pilot piece, but very excited about the fact that this is going on. I also want to lift up Dave Passero, who has a lot of efforts surrounding student voice in his building. And so he is probably further along in the efforts than we as a district are, but we are actively partnering with him to learn best practices and replicate things that work well, as we were so much encouraged very early on in the year to replicate and not just keep recreating things. So it's happening. We're out there. We're getting kids information. They are sharing with us. We are excited. So the current effort right now looks like identifying methods to gather student feedback. We always say the word survey. We know the survey word is loaded, but we actually lifted a survey. The goals of that survey were to gain an overall sense of how students are doing being back in school and the perceptions, which is really important, that they have of the adults working with them. The second thing was to use the data to engage in immediate and future action planning to support our students, our families, and our teachers. Implementation. So students in grades 3 through 12 were invited to respond. The surveys were delivered by teacher prompting and by an alert that showed up on Chromebooks to make them kind of respond to the survey, or to ask them to. We had respondents from 19 schools and programs across the district, and 550 students responded. And we know that's a small amount of our students, but one voice is as big as every voice if you think about what students need to know, be able to do, and experience in our schools. So here's some questions. And I'll take a minute for you all to just reflect on those questions that were asked of your students. Again, grades 3 through 12 across 19 campuses, 550 students. What is really important to name and note are the two places where we're over 80%. Adults know my name. So if you think about our guiding principles about kids being seen, valued, and affirmed, and the importance that names hold for our schools and our scholars and our kids, the fact that kids are acknowledging that adults know their name is actually something to celebrate. Because it's not hey you, it's not dear, it's acknowledging who kids are as individuals, and this is a first deposit of them being seen. The other thing that is highlighting here is I feel adults believe I can learn. We know from a number of studies, including one called the Opportunity Myth from TNTP, that the belief in students to be able to learn directly impacts what teachers give them access to in classrooms. And so if we have teachers that believe, or at least kids that believe that teachers believe, they are much more likely to engage with the rigorous content that they are not at grade level yet, but can believe they can get there. And so those are two really important things to highlight that we're hearing from our babies, or our students, is that they feel that the adults around them believe they can learn, and people know their name. The next measure is, do they actually hear their names being called? But at least we know in that they believe that the teachers around them believe that they can learn. The other piece of survey data is around the academic experience. And so this is, again, perception information from students. So not quite scientific, but informative just the same. Working at grade level. So go back to our guiding principles where I believe that students, or we believe that students should have access to grade level every day. Students believe at this point they are getting access to grade level content, which is good, right? So if they believe it and they're working on it and they believe the adults believe in them, when we update and change the content, there are some things that are already in place for us to ratchet up or provide different experiences to kids. And then I'm engaged at school. And so again, 76% of our 550 students are engaged at school. Deeper dive, engaged in what, right? There's a question there. And is that engagement in the thing the right thing? But at least we have students who believe they are engaging at school with the right grade level content. And so we have something to build upon the work we need to do. So next steps for student voice include going back out and updating questions for different things. We are going to think about how we increase the number of respondents, increase the number of schools, but this is the work the team is working on to figure out how we get more student voice into the experiences and then use that information to impact our decision making as we move forward. So I said I was gonna make one hard pivot. This is the second hard pivot. New course selection. So this goes to that course selection guide we've been talking about in the experiences. I will acknowledge the course selection guide did not come to you all. We are holding it back because we are adding new courses currently. So we are currently in the window between now and November 15th, where secondary schools can propose to the district, myself, the content directors, new coursework they want to add to the buildings where they have capacity. And so you know that if we add a course, we have to have an adult who has the knowledge and skills to teach that course. And so we're in that process now. The content directors are identifying additional courses for expansion in 22-23. And we are really starting to look at our data around our AP accelerated learning at 7 and 8. We have more credits that come, they go into high school. So all the things we're putting together so that we have a journey that our students go through K through 12 that starts in getting them ready for post-secondary as early as K, right? So just put that there. The other piece of this I'll lift up and intertwine is that we did identify ways and resources to increase the amount of AP courses that we're offering across the district to meet the goal that in every secondary school we will have an AP set of offerings. But that does come with, we have to identify the adults who have the right knowledge, who are willing to go and get the additional training and certification to offer the course. And so I think it's important to lift that up as well, that we just can't toss a course into a building. We have to have an adult or build an adult or have an adult who's willing to jump out there, deepen their knowledge so that what they're giving the kids is right. So that's new course selection. This is a repeat. Again, it's small, but very early on in the course selection high school process, we lifted up key actions around the course selection guide. This highlights in your handouts what's actually occurring. And this all goes back to what you've heard me say previously. In the update of the course selection guide, we are aligning the formatting, the numbers, the usability for everyone. We're doing that. We're changing language. We're omitting old courses. We are adding the descriptions for new courses. This might also be a place to name that there was a young man who spoke at one point about a mental health course that he is lifting up. The principal has reached out and we are in communication on how to make that happen. But that might take some time. But where there is a intention, there is a way. And so the key actions to just lift up around, again, our organization, our data reviews, and equity and access is happening. The same thing, key actions, the one that is in green is we still have one school as a result of state support that is working on high school redesign. So that is still in process. And then some of the other work that we're doing is in process, which is why it's not green yet. So I am reluctant to put anything in green that we can't specifically say that is happening with fidelity and consistency that has an outcome. So I anticipate coming back to you all in future board meetings and future ESA meetings and turning everything green so that you all have confidence that the key actions around updating our secondary programs are in process. And so, additional considerations. These are all the things that we are working on as we do this work, and I'm going to read them out so that people hear them very clearly. What additional pathways or programs we want to create within a district? This goes to our earmarking of some additional funds to build portfolio programs around AVID, PBL, IB. We've actually also expanded some courses around digital music in some places and have been approved recently for 3 additional CTE pathways to be approved at Edison. How do we expand successful models or programs across the district? What type of supports do we offer at the early secondary grades to support students across high school planning? What capacity building must we engage in to ensure that the counseling department creates a dynamic and ambitious schedule for students? We know that if the schedules aren't right, the access isn't right, and we cannot do what we need to do. And then what capacity building must we engage in to improve instructional outcomes so students are prepared to take on grade level and accelerated coursework? And so with that, that's the work that we're doing. Let me preview next month for you. We will update on our curriculum, instruction, assessment, MPD, as always. You will hear an update on the Telomere Project, which is a way that we are jumping into schools to gather more information on how our kids learn. We'll be presenting first quarter student achievement data. Remember that I said that our first quarter ends on November the 12th, and so in our December meeting, we'll come to you with our disaggregation of that data and what that means for next steps. And then additional aggregate data on our CFAs and what that means for our intervention, enrichment, and acceleration options. And with that, I submit my update and invite any questions or comments.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Superintendent. Just one thing that I would say, the person who is the student who's spearheading the mental health, he was on the news, so it's out there in the community. And before I open it up for questions, and I have so many, so I'm very excited about it. But let me just acknowledge the two commissioners-elect, Commissioner Patterson and Commissioner Simmons. So just want to welcome you and acknowledge you and congratulations. And we know we did it via email, but just wanted to do it publicly. So welcome, look forward to working with you both. So I'm going to ask if there are any questions. Okay, let me just start down to Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. Dr. Black, thank you so much. And one of the things I really liked about this presentation was just, it looks like there's a focus on gathering that student voice, which is really critical, and the perceptions that our students have about their teachers and their schooling. And you know what, I think you highlighted it perfectly too, that our teachers in this district are doing amazing work. You know, just highlighting the science lesson that you looked at and the Edgar Allan Poe poem. So thank you for that. It's great to see that that work is being recognized by central office. Again, our teachers are doing amazing things, and you know, teaching and learning, it definitely is taking place, but I would like to highlight that our teachers are doing this despite massive shortages. So I think they should be commended even more so, simply because of the conditions that they are working under. You know, the shortages of support staff in other areas district-wide, it's pretty alarming, and I think the teachers bear the brunt of a lot of that. I also want to emphasize that, you know, we're short social workers and counselors and need to be able to provide for our students' social and emotional needs. And without this, students don't learn. So we've looked, I love what we've presented here on the teaching aspect, but it's the learning aspect that I would like to see us focusing on as well. When we have these shortages, students aren't going to learn, right? And students can't learn if they don't have a safe school environment because of those staffing shortages. Some of our most at-risk students, if they don't have access to ratios of counselors and social workers that we need to see in our buildings, kids aren't going to learn. So I really want to make sure that we're also looking at what it takes for our students to learn, and also highlight and raise up our teachers and the staff and our paras who are doing such extraordinary work with our students despite these types of challenges and shortages. You know, even our cafeteria employees were short so many staff challenges, and hungry kids aren't learning, and if they're not eating good quality. One thing I would like to say is in the presentation on slide 19, you said, what capacity building must we engage in to improve instructional outcomes so students are prepared to take on grade and accelerated coursework? And I would say that in order for us to do that, we've got to just appropriately staff our buildings and focus on those things and highlight the great work that all of our employees are doing despite these challenges. So it was more of a comment than a question, but thank you so much for your presentation, and I can't wait to see more results and more your presentation in December. So thank you, and welcome to the position.
Commissioner Powell, did you have a question? No. It's okay, Madam Vice President.
Yes, sir.
I want to say thank you for the work. It's such an extensive presentation. It's difficult to put together. And this is a fair word for me, excitement about your presentation. I've been here about 14 years, and with all due respect to the folks who worked really hard to make this district better, and there is some evidence of improvement, this is really one of the best put together presentations, connecting your action steps and the superintendent's action steps now to the strategic plan, to the independent monitors plan. So I'm really impressed and excited about the possibilities. Now, nothing has happened just yet, so I'm sorry I have to temper my optimism, but I'm sure you can appreciate that. But I would describe it as excited to see the level of planning. And to put it in simplest words, it appears that the bar is being raised. And how you're raising the bar, in part, is, as the PowerPoint says, you're including student voice, right? And you're also using student voice to monitor and manage the students' efforts to get, and teachers' efforts to get close to that new bar being raised. I also think that you are pushing the bar higher by talking about and holding your own feet to the fire by talking about new course selection, right? Advanced placement. I think that is particularly important if our students are to succeed. We say we want 100% graduation rate, but that doesn't happen unless you're following the NWEA results. That doesn't happen unless you push our students to take AP courses. And again, I apologize that to myself and to others, that I can't put in words why, after listening to this presentation, I leaned over to your boss and I said, I'm literally tell you what I said. I said, she's good, right? And you deserve that praise. Now, again, I'm going to temper my remarks by saying you ain't done nothing yet, right? I get a little snap of that, but I appreciate the thought. Now, hear me out. The thoughtfulness and thoroughness upon which you have built this effort to raise the bar. So thank you for that.
Anything else, Mr. President?
No, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark, do you have any questions? Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I just would just conclude by, there's one word that I saw, telomere. Is that what it is?
Telomere, yes, ma'am.
Telomere. I actually saw that word for the first time. I know Superintendent Myers-Small, we're reading a same book entitled Cast by Isabella Wilkinson, and I saw that word in that book dealing around DNA is what I believe it was associated with. So it's just, and I just read that term today, so I'll have to figure out more what that means. But to go along with what the president said, great job. We're looking forward to it. I'm just my thought is with the superintendent, you and the team, just keep focused on the mission. Stay away from the noise, because it looks like we're in the midst of doing some great things, and it may seem that somebody may want to sabotage this work. And so just keep focused, and whatever the noise is out there that's also created by the media, let me just put that out there. And as opposed to this great work that we're doing, just continue to focus in on this work and not on the noise that we hear from others, and also that they get set up within the media. Thank you.
Dr. Black, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. I was reviewing the survey questions, and what struck me is there were several prompts in there that students could respond to, but there are three in particular, loosely worded. I have a non-relative who knows my name. I feel I'm included and I matter to my school community. And when you look at the research around ACEs, or adverse child experiences, those 3 prompts are the ones that have the biggest bang to counteract adverse child experiences. So to see the data where it sits, and I want to, am I correct that that was for Northeast, or was that overall?
So it was collective, our 550 over 19 schools and programs.
Over 19 schools and programs, okay. So to see those percentages, and particularly as they related to those areas, was really encouraging, because we keep on talking about the trauma that our scholars just, you know, pre-COVID experienced, and then you lay over COVID-19 onto that. So this is really powerful research and work, and I see Dr. Haynes here. I think it's very, very exciting to see this work. The other thing that I wanted to ask, and I just want to put this out here because I was really excited to hear that young man who talked about the mental health course. So I want to just make sure, I know it's not going to slip through the cracks, but I'm very, very interested in knowing more about that particular course and seeing how we can incorporate that. And I would even go a step further, that I would want to mandate that course for all of our scholars in the Rochester City School District. And I don't know if it would be a 9th and 10th grade, or focus on 11th and 12th grade, because I don't know what the content is. But when I heard that, that got me really, really excited. And, you know, the last thing is that, you know, I see the media is here tonight. These are the type of stories that I would respectfully ask that you go back and have a conversation with Dr. Black in teaching and learning. She has an arsenal of team behind her, but talk to our director of mathematics, talk to our director of ELA, talk to what they're doing with bilingual education or multilingual education, because that is the way that we do effectively put out what we're doing in our district. And we are doing some incredible things that just go kind of by the wayside. But I just would respectfully ask that you circle back and you do some stories about what's happening in teaching and learning.
Media to call me first, and then I will direct them to the correct individuals.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
But thank you.
Thank you. And the next, let me just ask if Dr. Jallo or Dr. Nems has any questions? And I don't know if Commissioner LeBron is still on. I think she's gone.
No questions for me. I thought it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nems, any questions?
Just a comment. I actually commented, I sent Dr. Black a text as she was presenting and said, extremely well done. And, you know, I've been working here for almost going on 7 years, and she definitely has raised the bar. So thank you, Dr. Black, for focusing on curriculum instruction and assessment. It is so much needed and appreciated.
No, you cannot have her at East DPO.
Nobody else can either. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Black. So the next item is from Systems Integration, I believe it is, and that presentation will be done by our superintendent, Dr. Myers-Small, correct?
No, we
what
do
did
have.
I miss?
You were going so great.
No. Okay.
They are on Zoom. We have with us.
Oh, so it's not Dr. Myers-Small, it's someone else who's making this.
That is
Okay.
correct.
My apologies.
We have Laura Gustin from, who's the Executive Director of Systems Integration Project, and I believe she's also joined by Cynthia Pace. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Should I be managing my slides from Zoom? I just want to clarify.
You can. Give us 1 second.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Thank you. And do you have the right version of the presentation now? Can I confirm?
Yes, we have the update. You can
Perfect. So thank you, everyone. Good evening for having me here today to spend a few minutes talking about the Monroe County Systems Integration Project. My name is Laura Gustin, and I'm the Executive Director of the work. I want to start this presentation by asking you to imagine for a few minutes. Imagine a parent and a pediatrician and a principal all working together to resolve a student attendance issue. Imagine knowing that a family was facing eviction and directing them to the perfectly matched provider who could stabilize the household in a matter of days instead of months. Imagine proactively being informed when a student's parent is hospitalized or incarcerated instead of reacting to a suspension or a slip in attendance only to discover that the root cause was a significant event that happened weeks prior. Imagine student immunization records being electronically verified from NISIS, so no child begins school late because their parent couldn't retrieve and transport paperwork on time. Imagine having a collaborative table of over 40 impacted community members and decision makers from the health, human services, and education and public sectors working together to proactively resolve pressing community issues. This is the type of knowledge and connectivity that the Systems Integration Project is facilitating for all institutions and sectors across Monroe County. When we talk about the system, we are referencing the largely unplanned, irrational, and unnavigable web of services that are available to those in need. Day after day, we ask people needing supports to enter this system, including the students and families served by the school district, and then we wonder why outcomes are never realized. In 2015, IBM was brought to Rochester to help us better understand the persistent and pervasive poverty in our community. IBM found that while we are program rich, we remain outcome poor due to the very nature of the system systems that focus on the outcomes of service providers and funders instead of people, and no real ability to measure the impact of the system due to significant data inconsistencies. Inspired by these findings and seeking to prevent duplication of efforts, providers from across Monroe County came together in the summer of 2017 to discuss how they might transform the system of service delivery. They agreed that through the Systems Integration Project, they would work together to build an interconnected, person-centered system of health, human services, and education, leveraging a unified information platform to improve health and economic well-being of individuals and families, especially those who are vulnerable or impacted by poverty. Since that time, the impacted community members and over 200 community leaders and providers from across the health, human service, education, public, and philanthropic sectors have come together to build trust, plan, design, and now implement the Systems Integration Project. The overall success of the Systems Integration Project will be measured by the improved health and economic well-being of individuals and families in Monroe County, especially those who are vulnerable or impacted by poverty. When individuals and organizations actively use the tools and resources created by the work of this project, individuals and families will be more empowered to advocate for their health and well-being. Information will be shared thoughtfully and confidentially so care teams can better respond to an individual's needs more holistically. Community trends will be better identified to shape programs and responses that best fit our community's unique needs. Services and programs will be more aligned and coordinated across all aspects of our community, and investments in our community will be better spent, allowing more individuals and organizations in our community to thrive. Within the Systems Integration Project, we believe that how we work is as important as the vision we seek to create. Early on, we discovered that change would only happen at the speed of trust. And so the first 2 years of the project was spent building trust among typically siloed institutions and sectors and making decisions using a consensus framework. We fully attest that this is, in addition, we fully attest that this is much more than an IT project. What we aim to achieve is not a piece of technology, but an integrated health, human service, and education system that works for people. We know that community engagement is imperative. Impacted community members participate in all aspects of our work, from strategic goal setting to developing pilots for systems improvements to participating on the My Wayfinder user design team. And finally, we use human-centered design in every aspect of our work, which means we talk to people and providers about what they want and need from the system. Then we prototype, pilot, and ultimately implement based on that input. Human-centered design really ensures that we are centering community voice in all of our work. Beyond the explicit focus of human-centered design, the Systems Integration Project practices community engagement through a standing community voices network, embedded diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and a first-of-its-kind equity review board that reviews and improves project pilots and plans using an equity lens. One of our key deliverables is the implementation of My Wayfinder, a common view of services and needs that is available to both individuals and service providers across all sectors. My Wayfinder is currently being designed with input from both providers and community members, and pilot implementation is planned for March 2022. For those curious about privacy and security, I can assure you we've had over 20 lawyers and privacy officers meeting every month for the last 2 years to develop our legal framework for data sharing, including representatives from RCSD and other Monroe County school districts. I would also note that our goal is to integrate existing data into this data ecosystem instead of creating new. This means that core data sets such as the 211 Community Resource Directory, RTS transportation schedules, or health information currently held in the RIO will be leveraged as part of our data model. We're also building My Wayfinder to data equity standards recently published by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, including ensuring that data is requested but not required for services, that clients have the opportunity to easily understand how data is being used, and that community members can opt in or opt out of contributing their data at any time. Within My Wayfinder, individuals can access a 360-degree dashboard page to send a needs request, take an assessment, or watch videos to learn about creating an account, building a care team, and future features such as referrals. With consent, My Wayfinder can allow school staff to see a more holistic view of students and families to better to support and help create strategies for success, can see family goals and needs in areas such as transportation, safety, and food, and view external supports and services that are already being used or that require a referral. In addition to designing and implementing My Wayfinder, all participants in the Systems Integration Project are actively working toward establishing a new vision for integrated service delivery. At the center of this vision is the community member. The community member will have control of what information is shared and who it is shared with. The community member will determine to what extent they want to participate and what goals are priority. The community member chooses providers to collaborate with in both setting and reaching goals, and the community member and their chosen care team have access to the rest of a provider network to provide the support for the services required. Within the provider network are neighborhood hubs. These physical hubs are dedicated to serving residents living nearby. A hub is the center of activity in a neighborhood or area and acts as a front door for community members to access program supports and services. Other integral components of this model are community advocates and system navigators. Community advocates live in the neighborhood surrounding a hub and are advocates for the health and welfare of its community members. And system navigators help community members identify and successfully access community resources necessary to reach self-defined goals and improve overall health and well-being. The vision for this integrated service delivery is currently under development and will be piloted along with My Wayfinder in March 2022. I want to note and recognize that there are organizations currently filling the role of neighborhood hubs and residents currently working as community advocates and system navigators under other titles. As an integration project, our goal is not to duplicate these important community assets, but instead to lift, align, and connect these bright spots in the system. I want to use my remaining few minutes to provide some examples of systems integration examples. First, between March and June 2020, the systems integration project was put on pause to support COVID crisis response. During that time, the project office was redeployed to support the community's effort. First, using the existing structure of the systems integration project, we launched and facilitated a tactical cross-sector response team. This group of community leaders met every day, including weekends for weeks, in order to identify and troubleshoot emerging issues. How do we prevent the spread in the homeless population? Do masks work? How do we acquire masks in community settings? What does it mean when an employee gets a quarantine order? Where do we find hand sanitizer? How do we feed children? How do we close the digital divide? Other activities supported by the SIP project office during this time, including design and implementing from scratch a PPE supply chain in partnership with Goodwill, RTS, and United Way. Setting up an agile project management framework to manage tasks and activities across organizations, and using our experience with the Mighty Network tool to launch and facilitate a human services support hub, which persists via maintenance from United Way. A few additional examples of systems integration work that supports students and families over the past year include our work with the Youth Behavioral Health Pilot, which aimed to improve the connection between pediatric psychiatric emergency, mobile crisis, and Monroe County single point of access to long-term behavioral health supports. As a result of this project, we were able to significantly increase the number of referrals for those coming out of CPEP into long-term supports. As you can see, in 2020, only 5 referrals existed between these typically siloed settings. And during the 8-week pilot period, where we tested our referral workflow, 57 referrals were actually found to be valid and needing to flow through. Another example is our work with Monroe County, City of Rochester, 211, and numerous community-based organizations and neighborhood-based front doors to redesign the way that families could access eviction prevention services. As a result of that work, we have been able to stabilize 7,150 households over the past year, and getting into community $29.3 million in direct rent payments. And I would note at the same time, while we've had this success, other communities across the country are now facing eviction crises because they've been unable to move these essential dollars out the door. And so through Eviction Prevention Pilot, we were really able to totally transform that workflow. We took a process that took 8 hours and many organizations to a process that took 30 minutes. And then finally, coming soon, an important thing I think for the school board to know is that Systems Integration Project was contracted to project management and facilitate the DHS transformation work. So a lot of the tools that we use, particularly human-centered design, will be used to help figure out how we want to transform DHS over the next several years. And this project will launch in November 2021. And so again, thank you for coming and connecting with us. Thank you, President White, Vice President Elliott, and the school board. We really appreciate the district's participation in systems integration across many of our work groups and activity, and just look forward to continued participation and support. And I think also want to make sure that you all know that we exist. So if there are things the district need us to lean in on, we are here to support and help.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. All right, the next item of it.
I'm sorry, Vice President Elliott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry, I was gonna raise my hand, but I see you're moving very quickly. I'm not gonna join back on camera, but I will make comments with my camera off.
Okay.
I do wanna just thank you for inviting systems integration to be a part of the ESA today, so that they're on record and our families can hear from them. There's a lot of work happening with systems integration, and for those who know me, know I'm a really big fan and actively involved, and also looking forward to the DHS transformation
And that, I think, is going to change not only the landscape for this community and how we access services, but for many, many of our families who are connected one way or the other to the county, whether they're getting child care dollars or SNAP benefits or Medicaid and Child Health Care Plus or CHIP through the state. There are many ways our families are interconnected to this work. So thank you, Laura, and your team as well for coming today to present. And I look forward to figuring out ways on how we can continue to uplift this information, educate our elected officials and our community about the next steps, especially around the My Way binder. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's our pleasure.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's presentation. This is recommendations regarding school reconfigurations for the next academic year.
Thank you. Good evening, President White, Vice President Elliott, to our commissioners, and to those who are watching the presentation. Tonight, I am going to be sharing with the Board of Education and our public some recommendations relative to moving forward with school configurations, mergers, and closures. This certainly has not been an easy discussion, and at times it may be difficult for some of our school communities to hear the recommendations. But before I get into the specific recommendations, I want to provide a little bit of context. And it's important for the board and the public to understand the thought process as well as the rationale behind the specific recommendations that I am making tonight. This work was grounded in data, which involves accountability status, so how the school is doing academically, enrollment across the district as well as in respective schools, access to equitable academic programming, and you heard Dr. Black talk about that, and she speaks with that with regularity. Building capacity, use, and condition. And these are all things that the team used to develop the recommendations. So as I move forward to talk about this, it's also important to know that this work really is undergirded and it comes through the lens of making sure that we have schools in place that are good for our scholars and that provides opportunities for them to learn and grow and to ensure that they are college, career, as well as civic ready. This presentation also is laying a fact-based foundation for any future changes that we endeavor to make to schools. And really, it's important, and please hear this, to encourage everyone, individuals, groups, schools, parents, caregivers, to consider the whole district in its entirety rather than a specific school. So just a little bit of background information as far as the Rochester City School District. Currently, our enrollment sits at a little under 24,000 students, and you can see how that teases out amongst the different configurations in the district. Our demographics, our racial and ethnic demographics, and then percentages relative to students with disabilities, as well as English language learners. This next slide, I think, is critically important. And this talks about the school-age children who participate in programs who live in the city of Rochester, but are not attending a Rochester City School District school. You can see we have a little under 7,000 students attending charter schools. We have about 1,400 students in private and parochial schools, a little under 1,000 participating in urban suburban. Our homeschool numbers sit at 705 students, and we've seen an uptick in this number. Our CSE, or Committee on Special Education Placements, 426 students, and then community-based programs for our youngest scholars is 1,300 students. If you look at just charter school, private, parochial, and urban suburban, that's almost 9,200 of our students that are participating in programs. So that's an indication that our families are not choosing to attend the Rochester City School District. And then that overall number is a little over 11,000 students. So what grounds this work? We all know that we have plans that we worked collaboratively with Dr. Jallo, our state monitor, and we have 96 current recommendations that sit between the academic and the fiscal plans. And a recommendation in that plan clearly states that the Rochester City School District needs to align resources according to the fact that we have declining enrollment, and I'll get into that data momentarily, declining population in order to maximize access to resources and programs in schools. You can see on this graph that there are 9 different school configurations in Rochester City School District. And you see on the far left, it starts with pre-K all the way through 9-12. In part, the multiple school configurations have contributed to the underutilization of school buildings, which leads to greater facilities and operational costs in the district. Multiple grade configurations impede vertical articulation and collaboration between schools because we don't have that consistency as far as how we're configured. The current model in our district impedes our ability to conduct student cohort data analysis as a strategy to improve student outcomes. And you saw that's a main focus under Dr. Black's leadership. Based on the feasibility study, it's important to establish school models, e.g. pre-K 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, to increase opportunities for our scholars. We are working to streamline grade level configurations in order to increase efficiencies in the district. The school of choice process is just one example, board commissioners, where we have overextended resources due to the possibilities of families wanting to leave a K-8 school or reaching out to 5th graders because there's one school with an entry point at 6th grade. There really needs to be consistent entry points so that there is consistent messaging, outreach, and connections with families. So as we think about the Rochester City School District, and if you remember, Dr. Morris a few weeks ago presented the task force updates, and her recommendation number 5 was for the board to consider pre-K through 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. This allows us, where possible, to increase opportunities again for that vertical and horizontal articulation, academic acceleration, facilities consolidation, as well as fiscal efficiency. So let's move into the guiding principles. What led the work relative to the recommendations that I'll be making shortly? 4 in total. Certainly access to equitable academic and extracurricular programming, and again, that's embedded in the work of the Division of Teaching and Learning. Also, enrollment and choice for our scholars and families. Accountability status is very important, and I'll dig a little bit deeper into that. We're a district that has multiple schools, 12 in fact, that are in receivership, and that is, receivership schools are an indication that we have the lowest performing school districts, schools in the state of New York. And then it's also important when we're looking at reconfiguration and merger and closure, building capacity, use, and condition. So let's start with the first guiding principle, access to equitable academic and extracurricular programming. We need to expand opportunities for our scholars at the secondary level. So for example, advanced placement courses, dual credit or concurrent credit, and we have a partnership with Monroe Community College relative to this. Career and technical education, as well as enrichment opportunities. You have heard scholars come to Board of Education meetings and provide public comment where they've shared it is so important for them to have multiple opportunities in whichever secondary school they're attending. There are often many references to 2 schools in particular, the East EPO that has the Teaching and Learning Institute, and they have some wonderful programs there, as well as Edison Tech, which has a plethora of career and technical education opportunities for scholars. We need to really be able to expand those opportunities across the district, so no matter where you're attending as far as a secondary school, that you have many opportunities to do so and to frankly pursue your dreams. Additionally, when we talk about equitable programming, we want to ensure that all students have access to specialized programs, continuums of services, and athletics to really provide those bookends and those supports so that they can be what colleges and universities refer to as well-rounded and successful students. Enrollment and choice. Rochester City School District enrollment has continued to see a decline pre-K through 12, and I have shared that information in education. The schools that I'm proposing have a school choice, e.g. participation in the lottery, of less than 1% to 1.5 to 5.4% when students are entering grade levels K, 7th grade, and or 9th grade. Families are choosing other school options, as I've mentioned, charter, urban suburban, private parochial, as well as homeschooling. And we have held, by law, we needed to host several public hearings for additional charter schools that are on the horizon. And as I shared, as of right now, we have a little under 7,000 students who are in charter school, and we have more that are coming. So we really have to take a critical look at the type of programming and supports that we're providing to students in our district. On the next slide, it just simply shows you the declining enrollment in Rochester City School District. You start at the year 2015-16, and you can see at 28,497, and as of November 5th, 2021, we currently sit a little under 24,000 students. Again, we have to be mindful that in September, we will have more charter schools that will draw students away from the Rochester City School District and attending our schools and programs. As we think about accountability status, we have currently 12 schools who are in receivership. So again, those are the lowest performing schools. We have shifted and dedicated resources, particularly at the central office level, with Chiefs Demario Strickland and Rhonda Morian to have an intense focus on our schools at the elementary and secondary schools respectively who are in receivership. They are chipping away, they're working with principals, they're working with staff to move forward, but yet and still we have 12 schools in receivership. Additionally, we have multiple schools, 14 that are TSI or targeted support, and 6 schools that are comprehensive support, so 20 schools. And only 14 schools are schools in good standing. And so that is something that we work collaboratively with and in conjunction with the New York State Department of Education. But the board has been very clear, the New York State Department of Education is very clear that we have to move the needle and shift CSI and TSI schools to good standing, and we need to move our receivership schools up as well. So this is an important target and benchmark. When we talk about building capacity, use, and condition, you can see that the way that we are currently structured with the schools and programs that we have in the Rochester City School District, we currently could host 34,000, a little over 34,000 students. But as I shared in a previous slide, our enrollment sits at a little over 23,000. So that's about a 10,000 student enrollment difference. Also, when you look at current building utilization, so seeing how many students are in the school and hitting the target of what the schools are able to hold, schools range from 5% utilization, which is RIA at the Jefferson campus, to 104%, which is that School of the Arts. So they're over subscribed, or the school is overutilized. We also know that when we have undersubscribed schools, that means that schools are not running near their capacity. So in some instances, we have elementary schools that have a single strand, meaning one class of kindergarten, one class of first grade, etc., in a building that can hold 2 to 3 strands. Some of our schools are at 50% capacity, while others are running more efficiently at 75 to 90% capacity. We did have some initial conversations around merging, closing, reconfiguring, and our conversations ended last year because we knew that COVID would continue to be an issue and we wanted to not merge schools at that time. Additionally, when we look at the age, condition of facilities, we have two schools, Building 41, but that's Rise 106. It's a wood frame building that's almost 100 years old. And then when you look at School 29, it's in need of mechanical upgrades to the HVAC system. So our process to get to the recommendations for school merger, closure, et cetera, we certainly did a data review. We looked at enrollment. We looked at school utilization. We looked at the size of schools. We looked at who was choosing schools and who were placed in schools through the school choice process. We also just looked at our district's history. What types of configurations have we had? Where have we been? And what has worked? We looked at, obviously, building utilization, grade configurations, and then we identified schools. So I know, again, we're at a challenging time in our district. We have a lot going on, and we've had some of those conversations tonight, as well as in previous subcommittee meetings or regular board business meetings. But according to Board Policy 7600, we followed this, we needed to have the conversation around this time because there's a 3-month window that we have to follow. So the board must be aware of the proposed plan. So these are recommendations, no less than 3 months prior to the resolution consideration, which in our case needs to happen in the month of February 2022, because if we are going to close a school, we must submit that information, that documentation to the New York State Department of Education no later than March 1st of every year. After tonight of me making the proposal recommendations to the board commissioners and to the public, we will have meetings at the schools that are going to be potentially impacted, and we will meet with not only staff and students, but also the school community to get feedback and to see what type of recommendations that those different stakeholders have. We need to have a public hearing, which we'll hold in December to gather additional input from our district stakeholders, both internally and externally. And then modifications potentially are presented to the board, which we also need to present a summary of comments offered by the different constituent groups that we will be interacting with. And then the board has a decision to make in February. They either have a resolution to approve, reject, or modify in part or wholesale the plan for closure of the school building or buildings. Now, we also know, it's just important to note, that the board may waive any of the above steps, but as we had conversations last year, it was really important to many of the commissioners to follow that 3-month process, and that's why we're having this conversation now. Again, I know that there is a lot going on, but we need to start the conversations in November and tonight. So one last slide before I talk about the schools that are proposed. This plan really is about benefits to students. And we want to ensure that there is equitable program for each student in the Rochester City School District. We want our students to attend a school that has a plethora of opportunities. We also want to make sure that there are consistent transition points and not those 9 different configurations that exist in the Rochester City School District. And we also want to ensure that there is robust academic and extracurricular continuums for our scholars. Now, one thing that I just want to add here, because it's not formally outlined in my presentation, I did say that I am recommending, proposing, and this dovetails with the presentation of Dr. Morris, that we would be a district of pre-K 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. but there are some schools that at this time we're not recommending to change. So that would be World of Inquiry, School 58, which is a K-12 school, the Reese's program, which is pre-K, K, and 1 for our little ones, our youngest scholars. Also, Wilson Foundation, which is a pre-K 8 school, because if you remember, we were overjoyed when that school was authorized by IB, by IB. We have both a PYP, so primary years program, and a middle years program. So if we had that school go from pre-K 8 to 5, that would really be difficult to offer those programs. And we really do indeed want to have a robust continuum where our students, if they start in kindergarten in a PYP program, that they take that all the way through Wilson Commencement and they earn an IB, International Baccalaureate Diploma program. So that, we're not recommending to change that school. And then also at this time, not recommending to change School of the Arts. And East EPO certainly is not in my jurisdiction, but they're currently 6-8, so that would remain as well as 9-12. So what are the recommendations that I'm making? I'll start with elementary, and there are 8 schools, and then we will move to the secondary programs. So you'll see that we looked at school number 7, and Rise Community School number 106. School number 7 is a CSI, Comprehensive Support School, and Rise is in good standing. What we are proposing is that school number 7 would close and Rise would move over to school 7. We are unable to merge these 2 schools because there's not enough just physical space for the 2 schools to come together in that school. Let's just talk a little bit about the decision-making process, because I know that that's something that's important. Certainly, number 1, those 2 schools are close geographically in location, and as we have conversation about zoning, that makes sense to make the decision with those 2 schools. Rise, as I noted earlier, wood-framed school that's over 100 years old, so certainly the condition of that school, as well as the accountability status of school number 7. So Rise would move over to school 7, and we would continue a school in good standing. Moving to the next recommendation, we look at school number 29, which is a school in good standing, and Dr. Charles T. Lunsford School number 19, which is a CSI school in receivership. So again, lowest performing school. Before I talk about this would be a merger, I do want to uplift and publicly acknowledge the work of Principal Silas and what she has been doing with her team. Although a school in receivership, they've worked very hard to address the demonstrable indicators, and we're seeing some improvement. Just recently, President White, Vice President Elliott, Commissioner LeBron, and Commissioner-elect Simmons, we were at that school and we heard from the principal and the staff and we took a tour of that school. And so I do want to uplift that and just be very public and explicit about that work. And I really am very impressed with the music focus and emphasis that they're working to embed in the school. But with these 2 schools, there would be a merger. So school 29 would, quote unquote, move into school 19. These 2 schools could merge together because there is enough space. Decision-making points here, again, close geographical location. We're talking about the condition of the building, which would be school 29, which the mechanical issues and the HVAC, and then the accountability status. So we would ask for what's called a school accountability review from the New York State Department of Education. And then we would know what would happen as far as what the academic designation for that particular recommended move. The third move would be Flower City School 54, which is a TSI school, and the Montessori Academy School 53, which is in good standing. We're recommending to the Board of Education for consideration to close School 54, and those students would participate in School of Choice, and we would move the Montessori Academy onto the School 54 campus. Again, unable to merge these 2 schools because of space. Decision-making points here include we'd be able to expand a signature program. You heard me mention we right now have a little under 7,000 students who are participating in charter schools or other school programs that are not the Rochester City School District. The Montessori program is a program that is well regarded, well renowned, and we think that we can draw some students back into the Rochester City School District by really fortifying and providing the resources for Montessori. And again, we would need to, with Montessori moving, that's a school in good standing, and so we are endeavoring or proposing to make that move. And then the last elementary move is School 25, which is a school in good standing, merge with School 39, which is a TSI school. So 25 would move into 39. We would merge both because there is room in the two schools for them to fit into one campus. Decision-making points here, very similar to the previous mention, is that we'll capitalize on signature program with the STEPS program and the speech program that's at School 25. The accountability status is a good standing school, which is important. And then prepare the building where Nathaniel Hawthorne, School 25, we'll start preparing that to become a middle school, and I'll talk about that momentarily. So those are the 8 school pairings that are my recommendations as far as elementary. Let's move to secondary school proposals. Dr. Alice Holloway Young School of Excellence, School 3, and Northwest, located at the Douglas campus. My recommendation to the board is to transition those 2 schools that are currently 7th and 8th graders, that we would have 6th through 8th graders. So again, shifting into that middle school model. And that would happen, I'm proposing for next year. Leadership Academy for Young Men, and those 2 schools are TSI and CSI respectively. I don't think the accountability status would change for those schools. It would just be that we're expanding to middle school. Leadership Academy for Young Men, which is a CSI receivership school. This recommendation here entails closing the school for the 7th through 8th graders. Students would participate in the school of choice process. Decision-making here is, it's an undersubscribed school. There's only about 550, 540 students in the school, as well as the accountability status. I have to lift up here under Principal Jenga St. Louis. She's been doing a great job in concert with her staff, with DeMario, Strickland working, but yet and still it is still a receivership school. So the recommendation would be to close that school. Further, Northeast College High School, located at the Douglas campus, which is a CSI school and in receivership, we would move that school to the Charlotte campus and have a social justice focus. So current 9th through 11th graders at Northeast would have the option to move to a new campus, or they could participate in the school choice process. Decision-making points here, Northeast school design is better suited for younger students. If you walk in the hallways, you can see that that's more suited towards middle schoolers or junior high school students. It also expands the school focus on student voice. And again, you heard Dr. Black in her presentation earlier talk about the work, and that under Dave's leadership, that really has been advanced very significantly in that school. And so we could, again, make that a very or extremely attractive option for students. And it will allow for increased extracurricular participation. Right now, they're a little more limited at the Douglas campus, but you have lots of options at the Charlotte campus. And then the final proposal for secondary, RIA is not a school, it's a program. They don't have a designation, so that's why you see not applicable. To shift that program over to Wilson Commencement campus. Newcomer students would, in 6th through 8th grade, would move to a middle school model, and 9-12 would be at Wilson Commencement. Decision-making points here include the fact that we can enhance the international baccalaureate high school experience and can begin shifting potentially to an international high school focus. How powerful would it be if our scholars at Wilson could take some of their assessments in May in a different language other than English? So that's the thought process there. So that is the, there's 8 schools for elementary, and then we have 5 schools that we're recommending for secondary schools. When you look at this movement, when you look at these changes, we're really only suggesting that 2 schools would not have students, scholars in them any longer, and that would be School 29, and that would also be School RISE, which is 106, or formerly known as School 41. So next steps are as follows. We need to have stakeholder engagement to react to the recommendations. We'll have school community meetings. The chiefs are working with the principals, so the dates will be determined and set where we'll work with the different school communities that I mentioned. We have the date for the Student Leadership Council, so that's right around the corner. In November, we have PLAC, our parent group, also in November, the Bilingual Education Council, December 14th, our Special Education Parent Advisory Group, December 13th. We would have the public hearing formally with the Board of Education on December 15th, and then a final board vote February 22nd. As I conclude my remarks, I just think it's really important to share that as I've been in schools over the past several weeks and months in person, I've had multiple conversations with our scholars, both at the elementary and the secondary level. And really, these decisions are based in part on the conversations that I've been having with our students. I know that some of these decisions certainly are difficult or challenging to hear, but really the bottom line is that it's trying to figure out the best ways to support the almost 24,000 scholars that we have in the Rochester City School District. This is really important work. I have been charged by Vice President Elliott and other commissioners that we do have to restart recouping students back from charter schools, and that we have to figure out ways that we can effectively do that. And this is our attempt as a team, with me making these recommendations to the board to do this. And so with that, Vice President Elliott, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Superintendent, excuse me for that. But just one thing for the public who's listening to this, can you describe what CSI and TSI is, please?
Sure. So CSI is Comprehensive Support Improvement, and TSI is Targeted Support. I'd ask one of the chiefs, or I'll ask Dr. Morris, can you just go into detail what that specifically means?
Good evening, Commissioners. So a comprehensive support improvement school is a school where the all student group is to state level in a particular subject area. So for example, if they do not meet the standard in the all student group for English language arts, the school could technically become a CSI school, or a comprehensive support improvement school. For a targeted support school, it is one of the subgroups that has fallen short of state expectations in a particular subject area. So the subject that the subgroup is underperforming is the area that the school would be identified for accountability status. And that would make it TSI for that area.
Okay. Could you also explain receivership? What is receivership?
Receivership is a school that has been underperforming as analyzed by the New York State Education Department for a significant amount of time. So they've had struggling schools and they've had persistently struggling schools, but that's after a long period of underperformance according to the state education's department's criteria for performance. So based on that, the identification of the school could be for receivership. In order to get off of receivership, the school district would have to be able to certify that the school has changed their accountability status after performing at state level for 2 years in a row.
All right, thank you. So I'm not sure there's going to be some questions. I'm going to start with Commissioner LeBron. Do you have any questions for the superintendent?
Yes, I do. And thank you for starting with me, because I'm going to log off and go to bed after this because I'm not feeling that great.
And we hope you're feeling good, Commissioner.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. I'm going to reach out to you later this week. I just needed some more time to rest, but
sure.
I did want to make some comments on record. And I'm glad that 7600 was referenced, because I actually discussed that today in a live. And I know that the superintendent met with board members, both in groups of 2 or 3. I know my meeting was individually and I was driving. There's some things that have bubbled up even in that conversation a few weeks ago with data, right? So I hear that you made decisions based on data, but I have yet to see the actual data for myself. And our policy 7600 also says that we are to have the academic and social history of the schools under consideration. I want to note that you noted 2 schools won't have students rise in 29, but mergers still lead to a school community being impacted and closed. The physical condition and limitations of the building. What was presented tonight was like a lump sum summary. I know that enrollment's been declining. I've literally spoken about this multiple times. And for many reasons, many factors as well. But I just want to, again, quote the data that we have not been given yet. And I think that these are really big and impactful decisions, and we should have this data. This data should be made public. The community has the right to know how these decisions were made beyond a glaring, absence of data of saying, we looked at this, my team and I. No, we need to actually see the actual numbers and the information that you made the decisions and how schools were selected. Because I can pull up reports that actually identified other schools, including when we had our interim superintendent here before he left, he gave us a list. There was a list of schools that Bowen Bargain also recommended. So I just need to see and understand how people are coming up with these particular schools and databases. I will not be supporting some of these, and some of these I will. And when I get there, I'll get there and I'll be very public about it. But the building to which students would be assigned, the financial impact of the school closures on the district, the alternatives to the closures that are available to students and their families. And at this time, I do want to uplift that in my one-on-one with the superintendent and her team when this conversation was being held and had. I did want to uplift that receivership schools, again, we make these decisions, but families also have rights under the school being in a receivership status. And then if the school building may be closed for academic reasons, that the plan consider whether the school has had a new principal in place for 2 academic years or less, whether the school has served as a receiving school for students reassigned to the building due to a school closure, consolidation within the last 2 years, and so forth. So those are the data points that I would like to see for every school that is mentioned as either merging or closing. And again, merging is a closure. I want to uplift RIA. The fact that we're bringing up RIA after we just traumatized RIA and the RIA families, I can't even begin to imagine whose logic it was to say that RIA would be better served in a higher IBM program. Our students from RIA are coming from refugee backgrounds and have not been exposed to education in the United States. And so on top of being transitioned into the US and to the Rochester community and the public education system in the US, and many, many, many times not speaking, not even a word of English, we wanna put them in an advanced program building space to further separate them from their families, their siblings, the community that they may know, and not understanding how our systems work and when refugees come here and where they get placed for housing. These are some of the things like who are making these recommendations and why are they making these recommendations? And it leads day in and day out for me that these are people disconnected to this community. That there's just no other path that I can conclude to that people who are connected to this community can make these recommendations and decisions. So there are some, again, that I will support, some I will not. I do want to also uplift, and I'm going to end with this because we're going to have it's going to be a long 3 months of conversations around this. I do want to uplift Montessori school because Ms. Harris-Pappin, you know, she was also a principal that was basically moved out of her school, School 1, and put over at Montessori. And then Montessori has not been provided the services and the supports and the funding and the trainings that they need. And this is not just a transition from one principal to another. The Montessori is a special program. And if we're going to say it's a special program, regardless of who the leader is at that time, they should have all the same access to resources and support from this administration and the administrations in the past. And that has not been the case. So I just want to uplift that because I do think that Ms. Harris-Pappin does the best that she can with the limited resources that she gets. But when there were other people there in leadership, they didn't have the same limitations that she's been given. So I just want to put that out there. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Commissioner Clark?
Yes, I had a couple of questions, and thank you, Superintendent, for going through the strategy. My first question is, how does this address the structural deficit that we know that we still have that we need to eradicate in the next 2 to 3 years?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
How does this plan impact the structural deficit that we have as a district that we know is going to come back and bite us in the next 2 or 3 years? So is this plan designed to address that?
So where it focuses, Commissioner Clark, is the fact that we have underutilized schools. So we're focusing on looking at how do we increase that, not fully to 100%, but to maximize or to increase that. The next step is to do an analysis relative to the moves that we would be making. So that will be embedded in that process for us moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, currently our student population is 23,865. Is the plan based on maintaining that population or increasing it through aggressive recruitment efforts to bring back charter school and other students?
So the goal certainly is aggressive recruitment, and if you remember just going back to that utilization slide, we still have a 10,000 student gap at this point. So we have room to definitely grow.
Vice President White?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
I am not doing my job tonight in terms of
No,
leadership.
don't worry
My
about it.
Goodness.
Now you know my pain at times. So.
My apologies.
No worries. Please, no need about it. You know, I made some comments in our officers' meetings, which I find extremely helpful and productive, and I don't need to detail them there. I do want to highlight just one of many good aspects of this plan. Although, like others, I look forward to the conversation that we will have over the months to come about this, and I appreciate you putting us on a time frame that is consistent with the board policies about school closure, so that's first to be respected and appreciated. The one thing that I would like to highlight and offer some suggestions is, you know, I'm often saying replicate best practices, don't recreate things that are already invented. There was a guy in this community, his name, he's moved. He was a lawyer, I think at Harris Beach, one of the large law firms. I'm looking over at Steve and Adrian. I don't know if they know him, but his name is Jack Hurley. And for many years, Willa, you might, or Cynthia, you might even remember his name. For many years, he was, and I think still is, a practicing lawyer at a very large law firm, and he ran, I think it was called the Law and Government School over at Marshall.
That's where I know him.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. He did an amazing thing. He took his time. I think he might have been allowed under some rule that New York State has to allow people to teach. And he led that law and government school like it was his own building. He created a moot court area where they actually had, it looked like a real courtroom with a jury box. And he had a great vision about what that school should look like. And so I'm looking at your PowerPoint. I see Willa shaking her head down there, so I think she remembers Jack. You say you moved Charlotte campus with a social justice focus. No need to reinvent the wheel here. Jack really had a passion. He had a plan. He thought it could be expanded. I would really encourage you, since you have a local connection here, and Dan, his son, also committed educator, I would contact Dan, get Jack's number, and talk to him about how he did that. And again, it was a wheel that he created and had some tremendous success. And I might be speaking out of turn, but I think one of Jack's sort of disappointments was that the district never really took that initiative to the next level. So I would encourage you, as you're developing this and conversating about all the aspects of this,
Got it.
talk to Jack. He really was an amazing lawyer and really committed educator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, Commissioner Malloy.
You know who you are.
That's right.
It's not a good day, for whatever reason.
That's all right.
Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. So I have 3 questions.
Sure.
And the first is a pretty easy one. How is the Freddie Thomas campus going to be used? Because if we're moving School 25 in the Montessori Academy, how will that space, is that going to be a swing space for other schools? How will we use that space?
Swing space right now, but the goal is to move, eventually shift to a 6 through 8, a middle school.
Okay, so just,
Yes.
okay. Thank
That's
you
a
for that.
beautiful school.
And then secondly, just to piggyback on what Commissioners LeBron and Clark said, I am interested in knowing the long-term financial impact on the district, so hopefully we'll have that soon. We have so many conversations ahead of us, clearly, and with the community, more importantly. But I do wonder, and this is my final question, how does all of this fit into our overall district restructuring or our placement policies? You know, what's that timeline? You know, we're losing students at an exponential rate. Even in the time that the short time that I've been here on the board, you know, we went from almost 26,000 students and now we're at almost 24,000. So that's pretty alarming for me to observe as a newer board member. We're going to be opening 6 charter schools next year. And, you know, I think the time has come to implore the state for a moratorium on charter schools.
I would agree.
You know, we have no say as a district over this approval process, and it's not sustainable for our district. So, you know, simply closing schools in the name of right sizing when we need to move towards maybe reconfiguring our entire district, perhaps to neighborhood feeder patterns, neighborhood-based elementary schools. We're looking at the very survival of our district, and we just need to have a more sustainable plan in place. So again, I'm anxious to see how this fits in with the overall district restructuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. And if you're, you know, Dr. Morris and I obviously work very closely together, but on this particular project or endeavor, we have to really be in lockstep because some of the recommendations I'm making dovetail into the recommendations that the task force and vice versa. So this is very much so interconnected to school zone, I'm sorry, I'm tired, Vice President, school zones, as well as the managed choice. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Dr. Morris, because I'm CP.
I think this is still on. Okay, it is. So yes, as the superintendent said, a lot of the decisions that we were considering as a team and the task force have related to some of the proposals that you've heard tonight. So it is not a separate conversation. A lot of time there was a consideration of the recommendations that have been put forward thus far by the task force. And of course, we will be coming back to the board as a task force for reconfiguration with some of those additional recommendations and data for the board's consideration as well. So that can be used in conjunction with decision-making going forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I would like to see the long-term, well, if we can do some type of impact study on how we project student enrollment to increase as a result of these measures. So that's some data that I would like to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Commissioner Powell?
Yes, thank you. So when the task force presented not too very long ago, you would admit that I was very aggressively pushing back, yeah?
Come see, come see, as the French say.
Madam Clerk, can you put that up? I expect a standing ovation for this. The policy.
Standing ovation?
For what I'm about to say from the administration.
Okay.
So what I'm about to say is.
Can you please put
Policy 4100 is on your side.
Okay.
Policy 4100 says resources shall support K-5, 6-8, and 9-12 high school programs of instruction.
So we need a standing ovation.
What I'm saying is that for the last 22 years, all of the changes that have been made by previous superintendents, while supported by a resolution, have been in violation of this policy. Okay? The policy is on your side. I want to give you folks the benefit of hearing that from the one person on this board that was pushing back the hardest. Okay? I take my role as the policy chair really seriously.
Maybe they deserve the standing ovation.
Well, if they knew it was in the policy and they brought it to my attention, then I'd say yes.
Sure.
What I would suggest, having pointed to this policy, is that this get attention forthwith so that it can move forward with your plan. And whatever exceptions, there's a space on for opening paragraph. Some district elementary schools are currently configured K-6.
Sure.
So you have to account for the variations or the exceptions to the rule. Having said that now, School of the Arts is a 7 through 12.
Yes.
And it used to be a 6-12 and the 6th grade was eliminated. So, and you're suggesting that it remain as is. What that does, though, is every student that hopes to go to School of the Arts has to find a new home for 1 year when you roll this out, which means probably you're going to get a lot of advocates to having 6th grade restored to SOTA, but there it comes with a problem, too. It's the one school that's over-enrolled, and if you add a grade, you'd have to phase it in. You have no room for a 6th grade, and if you add a grade, that is fewer students in incoming classes that even have a shot at engaging in School of the Arts, and now would be a fine time to talk about replicating School of the Arts. Because it is an overchosen school, we do have to turn students away. Never mind whether they're they get a 10 out of 10 on the addition. The fact is we have to turn them away when they apply. So all of that being said, I don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to arguing for maintaining K-6 and the 7-12. I still don't, it hurts to say it. It hurts to see that transition going forward, because when it comes to school choice, the more transition points, the harder it is to manage. And we were in our most efficient when we only had one transition point from 5 to 6. And when we introduced more K-8s and all of that, we just made our lives more complicated. So enough about that. The Montessori, I think you gave us a sneak preview of this in one-on-one sessions. I'm glad to see this in its context, because I see that you're essentially recognizing we can't grow Montessori And we can't just absorb Flower City because we don't have the teachers to do that. Teacher requirements for Montessori are different than others, but to the extent that they might move to a campus, a standalone campus that can allow them to grow, that is what managed choice is supposed to allow for, is successful programs can grow or be replicated. Flower City was one of those citywide draw schools that clearly it's not even effective in that role, so I'm happy to see that phased out. We should be talking about phasing out citywide draw schools either by making them zone-wide or making them go away if they're not highly chosen and if they're not educationally effective. And the last thing I'll say in support of in theoretical support of this is I've been struggling with the whole question of, well, you know, what is the capacity of our zones? I'm not getting these numbers. But based on the drop in enrollment, we could do almost anything in terms of closing schools. So, you know, as long as we're, you know, closing across the whole district and not jeopardize the student balance. We have so much excess capacity now. It's just dawned on me today that we ought to be able to accommodate every student who lives in the current zones. We could even take this opportunity to fine-tune the boundaries and make the boundaries more effective. I still object to a proposal of an east-west because what you're going to do is end up spending more on transportation instead of less. But with fewer schools, you can't really justify going to a quadrant system either, because you won't leave enough choices available to families. So, and I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of the ARIA going to Wilson, because an international baccalaureate program seems like would be a natural fit and a great place for international students who, although they might be not well placed academically, if they're coming to us from a formally interrupted education background, the tools are there for them to national education as opposed to just a standard high school education. And many of the RIA students are overachievers and are perfectly capable of finishing their high school careers with, you know, college credits and working, you know, towards an IB, a credential. So I am intrigued. And lastly, going back to the Montessori, it has chafed on me that Montessori is occupying what was built to be a middle school. So a proposal that would restore it ultimately to a middle school sits well with me. So having like been aggressive and to the point of argumentative when the task force presented their case, I'm beginning to warm to the ideas, some of the ideas that are being presented, and I apologize that it takes me so friggin' long to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you. President White?
Yeah, I wanted to say, as you all know, I'm increasingly often looking for opportunities to serve the district after I leave. I've mentioned participating in the superintendent's effort to get students out locations. What's that effort called?
Oh, Rochester City, RCSD takes over.
Takes over. When I was at Franklin at your conference this weekend, or the community's conference this weekend, I offered to participate directly and financially in the fire initiative.
Oh.
And then I want to plant a seed, and it connects this notion that we have to increase our enrollment. How do we do that? We have to offer the kind of programs that entice students to come back to the district. We can't just get off from the receivership list. We, as Dr. Black indicated, we have to really raise that bar by offering rigorous and relevant programming. So I mentioned earlier Jack Hurley. again, I am going to constantly be looking for ways in which I can continue my commitment. But this idea of looking at the wheel that Mr. Hurley created can really attract students to this district from the suburbs. Imagine, and obviously you have, having a social justice school. And imagine further that the exemption that, it may not be called an exemption, whatever is the state regs that allow a layperson to teach in schools, and there is one, and I don't know how the unions respond to that, but I know there is a statute that allows people who don't have normal certification to practice in schools. Imagine if you had doctors, lawyers, all sorts of practitioners, probation officers in a school that would really be relevant to children. So I'm saying, I know the board has a long ways to go, you got several months to do this, but as you develop this idea, consider having someone on your staff, including Dr. Miller, figure out what that protocol, that rule is that would allow the expansion of that role for outside practitioners to come in and teach kids. And I'm telling you, it's that Kevin Caution thing. You build that and they will come. The hottest issue in America today, in Rochester, is social justice. And imagine if you had the best and brightest practitioners teaching those areas. And here's where I'm saying, when I leave this board, because I'm not going to hustle and figure out what that rule is, because I looked at it one time, and it's quite a bit of work to do that. There's paperwork that has to be filed. But if you had somebody in Chris's shop that looked for the best and the brightest practitioners in this field of social justice to enter into a classroom and teach in that school, they will come to that building. So my suggestion is, if the board approves this transition to create a social justice school, that you put Chris or somebody on your team to look for those folks and say, you don't have to do the paperwork. We'll shepherd you through that paperwork. We just need you to get a security clearance, fill out the paperwork that we send you. We'll shepherd you through this process, and we will have a school that I trust you, people will come to. And I'm saying, this is another opportunity. I will be one of those teachers. And I know the stuff I got to talk about, students will want to hear, because my clients are those students. My clients are the victims of social injustice. And there's lots of lawyers in Rochester and doctors who are surgeons who have to deal with the fallout of the increasing number of shots fired that we have in this district. There's lots of other practitioners in the criminal justice system that putting them in a classroom would have students and their parents want to go to the Charlotte campus for that kind of thing. Again, I offer what little God has blessed me in terms of knowledge that is relevant and rigorous. I'm down to do that. And I know there are many other practitioners in this field that would be willing to do it too.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question that I have is, with this proposal, is FMP impacted in any way with this?
That's a great question, Vice President Elliott. That undergirded, this presentation.
Which is the Facilities Modernization Project.
This presentation was originally 45 slides long. It was, and so we had FMP. So as Commissioner LeBron was saying, we have the data that she's looking, we just didn't put all of that in here. This is our initial conversation. But FMP considerations were FMP, facility modernization, was taken into consideration with making these decisions. Okay. Absolutely. Phases 1, 2, and 3, which is still on the governor's desk.
All right.
Yes.
And then, like Commissioner LeBron, particularly since I'm the liaison for RIA, you know, that's going to have some discussion.
Sure.
We're prepared. Emotionally attached to RIA and the work that they do over there. So just know that I'm emotionally attached.
Understood.
To RIA, and yeah, there has to be some conversation. I'm already resistant, but
yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions for Dr. Myers-Small? Okay.
I just want to thank the board for just asking very thoughtful questions. And again, I'm just looking forward to the engagement over the next several months. This gives us some time, right, to have good conversations.
Yep. Thank you. So the next and the last item on the agenda is I asked Dr. Myers-Small to talk to us about the social emotional learning, the status of that. There was such a participation for the social emotional learning section on Saturday. And let me just give a shout out to Kelly Briggs and her team. It was a very good session, and I'm looking forward to us doing more of those. I think that it was just the beginning, and also to Dr. Hawkins, who
She did a great job.
hosted it for us, moderated for us, and so just looking forward in the future for more events like that, and to bring in the partners who were there at the on Saturday. So if you could talk a little bit, particularly because it was such a well-attended session on Saturday, talk a little bit about where we are with social emotional learning.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. So I attended at the beginning of the session, and I know Dr. Black might need to help me a little bit because she was there for a good portion, as well as Chief Strickland. But it was very clear to me that really was a focus and an emphasis. I think part of our issue, because we hear community members, parents say, where's the SEL? Where's the restorative practices? What are we doing with Rock Restorative, et cetera? Some way, somehow, we are not communicating and getting out what is actually happening. Because we do have things that are happening. Dr. Black and I were talking about that throughout the day on Saturday, and as we walked together to our cars, that we really need to make sure that it's very explicitly articulated. Here's what's happening at Franklin. Here's what's happening at School of the Arts. Here's what's happening at School 2. Here's the social workers, the school psychologists, Pathways to Peace, et cetera, Rock Restorative team. Do that school by school and district wide, because I think people think that it's gone by the wayside. We did have some reductions through our budget process going into this year, but good things are happening. There are some ways that we're looking to continue to fortify, but good things are happening, but we're just not uplifting that. We're not getting that out. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that was, again, continues to be very clear is we have to figure out how to make connections with our staff and their mental health. There are offerings. There was professional development, but we heard, you know what, that was the summertime, and now we need some different ways to access that. So to figure out how to really tap in with our staff to offer those supports and do some type of assessment, or figure out what people need, or a survey. Assessment might not be the best language for that, but just spending time over at Franklin, and Vice President Elliott and I spent some time over there with Carmine, Dr. Peluso, and we talked to teachers, and we heard very passionately from our scholars as well, and it just continues to be, we just continue to be traumatized. So one, figuring out how to make sure we make much more explicit what we're doing. Two, figure out how to survey and get an understanding of where our staff are. And three, figure out creatively how we can continue to capitalize with the city, how we can uplift our connections with the county. So I'm looking forward to participating in that meeting with you, with Dr. Aycock, and to just build other partnerships. And then as we move into the 22-23 budget process, of how to make sure that we're even just making more explicit, embedding that into the budget process. That's my assessment. I don't know, Dr. Black, if you had anything else. Good, okay. She's like,
Because she doesn't want to be here at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Any other questions? Okay, now, am I able to entertain a motion for adjournment, or do we need to do the survey?
There is a survey.
Who said motion?
Sean did.
I did.
I'm going to keep you here at 1 o'clock, Dr. Dale. 1 o'clock. Did you hear Commissioner Powell, Dr. Nels?
Oh, he did.
I did not know what she said.
She said that, did you forget that you're not a voting member?
I forgot. I was so busy giving her a standing ovation for the last half hour.
Touche.
That was
Very
hilarious.
good, very good, Dr.
I
Mills.
love it.
We got the survey?
Is the survey on here?
Yeah, you just.
Oh, poll, yep, okay.
In the meantime, there was a motion on the floor from Commissioner Malloy. Was there a second? I didn't hear one for the adjournment.
Well, I think we were waiting to do the survey.
Yeah.
Yes, but we could still, you know, just.
Oh, I second it.
Okay,
then.
all right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm in. I'm done. Oop, turn the mic off.
All set.
Okay.
Thanks again, Steve.